Hey guys, tonight we step quietly into the deep shadows of the Ozark Mountains, where an old building rises above the tree line like a pale sentinel. Its windows glimmer faintly in the moonlight, and the walls seem to hold their breath, as if remembering every whisper that has passed through them. This is the Crescent Hotel, a place known not only for its elegance, but for the lingering voices of the past that still drift through its halls. Some call it the most haunted hotel in America. Others simply say it feels alive. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The road leading to the Crescent winds steeply upward through thick forests of oak and pine. In the daylight, it is charming, a path tourists eagerly follow toward the promise of mountain views. But after nightfall, the trees press close their branches, knitting together overhead, blocking the stars. The sound of gravel crunching beneath the tires becomes the only rhythm until the woods part suddenly and the hotel appears. It looms like something carved from pale stone each level, stepping upward toward the spire-like roofline. The Crescent does not announce itself with warmth, but with silence. Lamps glow faintly along the driveway, their light swallowed before it can reach the deep lawn. The air is colder here unnaturally, so as if the building exhales an icy breath. Inside the hotel greets its guests with grand Victorian charm. Wide staircases, polished floors, chandeliers dripping with crystal. Yet beneath the opulence lies something older, something raw. The wallpaper patterns curl like vines, and the paintings of stern faces seem to follow anyone who dares pause too long. Staff at the front desk are polite, but subdued, moving with the quiet precision of those who have grown accustomed to the weight of the building pressing down on them. Amelia Hart arrived just after dusk, her suitcase rolling behind her as she stepped into the lobby. She was a travel writer, the kind who searched for stories not in brochures, but in whispered rumors. The Crescent had drawn her across several states, and though she carried herself with calm confidence, a sliver of unease slid down her spine as soon as she crossed the threshold. Her room was on the 4th floor near the top, where the roof angled, and the windows overlooked the dark folds of the Ozarks. The hallway stretched long and narrow, with heavy carpet muffling her footsteps. A single lamp buzzed softly overhead, casting yellow pools of light that did little to chase away the shadows between doorways. As Amelia fitted the key into the lock, she felt the air shift cooler, denser, as though someone stood directly behind her. She turned quickly, but the corridor remained empty. The room itself was charming antique furniture, polished to a gentle sheen, a tall bed with carved posts curtains that stirred faintly, though the windows were shut. She placed her bag on the stand and sat on the edge of the bed, listening. The hotel had its sounds, the creaks of wood, the hum of old pipes, but woven through them was another rhythm. It was soft like a faint tapping far below, or perhaps the dragging of something across a stone floor. She tried to dismiss it as her imagination and moved to unpack. But the mirror above the dresser caught her attention. Its surface reflected not just her image, but the faint outline of movement behind her shoulder. A shadow shifting, though, when she spun around the room was unchanged. The curtains lay still, the door shut tight. Yet the air held the distinct feeling of not being alone. Amelia had researched the Crescent's history before coming. Built in the late 1800s, it had been a luxury resort later turned into a hospital under the infamous Norman Baker, a man who claimed to cure cancer with false treatments. Many who entered the building during those years never left their suffering absorbed into the walls. The thought made her skin prickle. Determined not to surrender to unease too soon, she decided to explore. The hotel's corridors twisted in ways that felt almost deliberate, leading her past sitting rooms where antique chairs waited in silence, and down staircases that echoed with each careful step. On the second floor, she paused before a set of double doors. They stood closed, though faint strains of music drifted from within the delicate notes of a piano. She pushed gently, and the doors gave way to a ballroom vast and empty. Moonlight spilled through high windows, illuminating the polished floor. At the far end, where the shadows deepened, stood a grand piano. Its lid was raised keys exposed to the pale light. The melody lingered in the air, notes fading one by one. But the bench sat empty. Amelia's breath slowed. She listened harder. The music ceased, replaced by the creak of a floorboard somewhere behind her. When she turned, nothing moved, but the doors had shut themselves silently. The temperature dropped cold enough that her breath hung in a faint mist. She stepped backward, her shoes clicking faintly on the wood, until the piano loomed nearer. For a moment, she could swear the ivory keys dipped one after another, as though unseen hands continued the melody only she could hear. Then abruptly, silence pressed down. A voice carried across the room so soft it was almost a sigh leave. The word brushed her ear like cold air. Amelia froze, heart pounding, yet a strange calm accompanied the fear. She was not being chased. She was being warned. Slowly, carefully, she turned back toward the doors. They opened without her touch, yawning into the dark hallway. She stepped through, the sound of her heartbeat loud in her ears, and the doors closed behind her with a heavy thud. Back in her room, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Sleep came slowly, uneasy. Just before she drifted off, she heard it again, the faint music of a piano carried on the still air of the Crescent Hotel. Morning came reluctantly to the mountains. Pale light crept across the horizon, filtering through the lace curtains of Amelia's room. For a moment, the world seemed softened, harmless, the night's shadows replaced by a haze of gold and mist. Yet even in daylight, the crescent did not surrender its hold. The air remained cool, as though the walls retained the memory of every chill that had seeped through them over the decades. Amelia rose slowly, brushing sleep from her eyes, though she felt as though she had hardly slept at all. Dreams had folded over themselves, fragments of piano music, the sound of dripping water, a soft voice murmuring her name, though no one had ever spoken it aloud. She shook it off, trying to root herself in the ordinary: a hot shower, a cup of bitter hotel coffee, the scratching of her pen against her leather notebook. But every detail she tried to anchor herself with seemed tinged by the lingering night. She wandered the halls after breakfast, camera slung over her shoulder, recording details for her article. The crescent was beautiful in its way. Carved banisters, vaulted ceilings, wide verandas overlooking the valley below. Yet every corner felt slightly askew, as though time bent differently within these walls. Tourists bustled here and there, couples posing for photographs, children chasing each other through the lobby. To Amelia, their laughter seemed fragile, thin, barely pressing against the dense atmosphere. A man in a uniform jacket, clearly part of the hotel staff, caught her watching the staircase. He was middle-aged, polite in demeanor, but carrying a weariness in his eyes. He gave her a slight nod, then hesitated as though choosing his words carefully. "Fourth floor, isn't it?" he asked quietly. Amelia blinked. "Yes, how did you know?" His expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Most guests mention things when they stay up there. He glanced around, making sure no one lingered close enough to overhear. Strange things, sounds mostly, shadows that don't belong. I wouldn't linger in the halls alone at night if I were you." Before she could ask more, he tipped his head politely and walked away, his footsteps swallowed by the carpet. The day unfolded with a deceptive ease. Amelia explored the grounds, the manicured gardens dotted with old stone statues, their faces softened by time. She traced the perimeter of the building, noting the way the foundation clung to the hillside, and paused before the service entrance, where rusted doors led down into the basement. The staff didn't mention that level often, but Amelia knew from her research that Baker's makeshift hospital had operated in those lower rooms. Even in the daylight, a heaviness pressed from beneath, as though the earth itself resisted giving up what was buried there. When evening fell, the hotel shifted again. Lamps flickered on, glowing faintly along the hallways. Guests dined, their voices hushed, perhaps unconsciously subdued by the weight of history pressing in. Amelia lingered over her meal, jotting observations before returning upstairs. The fourth-floor corridor was quiet, too quiet, as though the carpet absorbed not only footsteps, but breath itself. She unlocked her door, entered, and nearly dropped her notebook. The curtains stirred, though the windows were latched tight. The mirror reflected not just her own image, but something else, an impression of movement, like smoke twisting just out of focus. She blinked, and it was gone, settling into bed with her lamp burning low. Amelia tried to lose herself in her notes, but the words refused to flow. Her mind kept circling back to the piano, to the staff members' caution, to the hush that filled the halls after dark. It was nearly midnight when she heard a soft knock at the door. 3 taps, deliberate, not hurried. She froze. The sound did not repeat. Slowly, she set aside her notebook and stood, pressing her ear to the wood. The hallway beyond was silent. She turned the latch, opening the door a fraction. No one waited outside. Yet down the corridor, at the farthest end, where the lamp flickered, she thought she saw a figure standing. Tall, thin, indistinct, almost blending into the shadowed wallpaper. Her pulse quickened. The figure did not move. Amelia held her breath, then blinked, and it was gone. Only the flickering lamp remained. She shut the door, bolting it. Crawling back into bed, she pulled the covers up and left the lamp on. Hours passed, marked only by the steady tick of the old clock on the dresser. When sleep finally took her, it carried her into another dream. She walked the hallways again, barefoot, her steps silent. The walls stretched longer than they should have doors, multiplying endlessly. From one room came muffled sobbing from another, the rasp of labored breathing. She pressed forward until she reached the stairwell. There, waiting in the half-light, was a woman in a long white dress, her face pale, her hair loose around her shoulders. The woman lifted her hand, beckoning. Amelia hesitated, fear pressing against her chest. But the woman's eyes were not cruel. They were sorrowful, pleading. Amelia stepped forward, and the dream shifted violently. The walls bled into darkness, the air thick with the sharp tang of medicine and rot. The woman was gone. In her place, a row of iron-framed hospital beds stretched into the shadows, each occupied by a figure that twitched and whispered. At the far end, under a single swaying bulb, stood a man in a white coat, his smile sharp, his hands stained. She woke with a gasp, her sheets damp with sweat, the lamp still glowing weakly on the nightstand. The hotel lay silent around her, but beneath the silence, she heard it again, the faint sound of wheels rolling slowly across the floor, as though a gurney were being pushed down the hallway just outside her door. And with that sound came the certainty that her dreams were not hers alone. The morning sun slanted across the 4th floor, thin and reluctant. Amelia stood by the window, gazing out at the fog clinging to the hills. Her skin prickled with the memory of the dream, the woman in white, the endless rows of hospital beds, the man in the stained coat. The echo of the gurney wheels still rattled faintly in her ears, though the corridor now lay silent. She pressed her palms against the cool glass, willing herself to focus. Dreams were only dreams, she reminded herself. Yet something inside whispered that the crescent had reached through her sleep, showing her fragments it wanted her to see. Determined to chase truth into daylight, Amelia descended to the lobby. The polished floor gleamed, and tourists moved about with easy chatter. She approached the front desk, where the same uniformed clerk from the night before stood. His eyes flicked up recognition in them, but his voice remained level. "Good morning, Miss Hart. How was your stay?" She hesitated. "Restless," she admitted. "Tell me, have others heard things at night?" "Wheels may be like carts or gurneys." The clerk's face tightened. His fingers tapped the counter, once then stilled. "The hotel was a hospital once. Many claim echoes remain. But I would suggest," he lowered his voice, "that not all memories wish to be disturbed." Amelia nodded, sensing the boundary he had drawn. She thanked him and stepped away, but the words clung to her like damp cloth. Later that afternoon, Amelia wandered into the library lounge, a small wood-paneled room lined with shelves of weathered books and photographs. Dust floated lazily in the shafts of light. She traced her fingers along the spines, pausing, when one thin volume slipped slightly forward, as if nudged. It was a collection of local histories, brittle pages bound in cracked leather. She settled into a chair and opened it. The stories within painted a picture of the hotel's dark years under Norman Baker. He had promised miraculous cures, gathering patients desperate for hope. Instead of medicine, he'd given them colored water, false tonics, cruel experiments. Many died within those walls, their final days marked by pain and betrayal. Amelia turned a page and froze. A photograph stared up at her Baker in his white coat, standing stiffly in front of a bed. Behind him, blurred but visible, a woman in white hovered near the doorway. Her eyes were downcast, her hands clasped before her. The same sorrowful gaze Amelia had seen in her dream. Her breath caught. It was impossible. And yet there she was, captured on film decades ago. That night, Amelia carried the image in her mind as she returned to her room. She kept her lamp burning, unwilling to surrender to darkness. Midnight came, and with it silence, then 3 knocks at the door. Soft, deliberate. Her heart pounded. She did not move. Again, 3 knocks. Slowly, she stood and crossed the floor, pressing her ear to the wood. From the other side came a whisper, "Help me." The voice was faint, feminine, edged with despair. Amelia gripped the handle, but did not turn it. Fear warred with curiosity, the urge to comfort pulling against the dread of what might wait beyond. She whispered back, her voice trembling, "Who are you?" Silence followed. Then slowly, the sound of retreating footsteps bare against the carpet, fading into the distance. She exhaled, shakily, backing away. But as she turned, her eyes caught the mirror again. This time the reflection showed not her own face, but the hallway behind her, stretching long and dark. And at the far end, barely visible, the white figure stood. Watching, Amelia spun around. The door was closed, the hallway empty. When she turned back, the mirror showed only her own pale, frightened face. Sleep did not come easily. She drifted in and out, caught between waking and dreaming. In that fragile space, she found herself once more in the endless corridor doors, stretching on without end. From behind, one door came frantic knocking fists, pounding as though someone begged to be freed. She reached for the knob, but the metal burned her palm. Another door creaked open ahead, and she stepped through into a dim chamber. The scent of chemicals was sharp, almost suffocating. glass bottles lined the shelves filled with murky liquid. A table stood in the center, and upon it lay a figure under a sheet. The sheet rose and fell with shallow breaths. A hand emerged pale and trembling, reaching toward her. Amelia staggered back. The figure beneath the sheet whispered her name, not in greeting, but in warning. Then the hand fell limp, and silence crashed down. She woke with a cry, heart pounding the sheets tangled around her. Her lamp had gone out, though she swore she had left it on. Darkness pressed close, thick and suffocating. She fumbled for the switch, and when light finally bloomed, the room looked the same. Yet the faint smell of chemicals lingered in the air, and on her nightstand beside her notebook lay a small glass vial filled with cloudy liquid. She had never seen it before. Amelia sat frozen, staring at the vial. The cloudy liquid shifted sluggishly inside, catching the lamplight with a murky glow. She reached out hesitantly, her fingers brushing the glass. It was cool to the touch unnaturally, so as though it had been resting in some forgotten cellar moments before appearing on her nightstand. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She hadn't brought it here. No staff member had entered, her door had been locked. Still the vial sat there, patient and deliberate, like a message left for her alone. She thought of the history books she'd read earlier that day, the shelves lined with Baker's tonics. This was one of them, an artifact impossibly displaced in time. She lifted it closer, holding it against the light. Bubbles drifted within, bursting faintly, as if the liquid still breathed. An acrid odor leaked past the cork stopper, faint but sharp, the smell of metal and rot. Her stomach turned. Setting it back down, she grabbed her notebook and scribbled frantically, "Found vial. Same as Baker's cure. Someone or something wants me to see this." The hours until dawn stretched endlessly. She did not sleep, listening instead to the silence pressing against the walls. At times, she thought she heard faint scratching at her door, as though fingernails dragged lightly across the wood. Other times, the muffled notes of a piano drifted upward, ghostly and incomplete. By morning, the vial was gone. The nightstand was bare, her notebook untouched, as though it had never been there at all. Amelia descended to the dining room for breakfast, her eyes scanning the faces of other guests. Laughter rose around her, the scrape of cutlery, the clink of coffee cups. Yet she felt separated, as though the building had pulled her into a parallel current unseen by others. She wondered how many of them noticed the subtle heaviness in the air, or if it pressed down only on those the crescent chose. A tour was being offered that morning, a walk through the hotel's haunted history. She joined the group, notebook in hand, eager for context, though wary of the glossy tales told to entertain tourists. The guide was a cheerful woman in her 40s, her voice bright as she led them through the grand lobby. She spoke of the hotel's glamorous beginnings, then of Baker's years. Her words softened to avoid frightening the guests too much. Yet, as the group descended into the basement, the cheer in her voice faltered. The basement corridors were narrow, the air damp and cool. Brick walls closed in, tightly lit by harsh overhead bulbs that hummed faintly. The guide gestured toward a door with rusted hinges. This, she said, was where Baker kept his laboratory. Patients were brought here for treatments. Amelia lingered as the others moved ahead, peering into the gloom. The door creaked, as if something heavy shifted behind it. She blinked, straining to listen. For a moment, she swore she heard breathing, slow-labored, just beyond the wood. Her hand hovered over the handle, but before she could touch it, the guide called the group along. Amelia stepped back, the sound fading as quickly as it had come. They ended the tour at the morgue, a small windowless chamber with tiled walls, its chill cut deep into the skin. Metal drawers lined one side, and an old gurney stood in the center, rusted wheels frozen in place. The guide smiled faintly, though unease shadowed her eyes. "Some say the spirits linger most strongly here," she offered. Perhaps you'll hear whispers if you listen closely enough." The group laughed nervously. Amelia did not. She stood near the gurney, staring at its surface. Rust flaked along the frame, yet a dark stain stretched across the metal, something older than rust. Her throat tightened. For just a moment the air shifted, carrying the sharp scent of chemicals again. She closed her eyes, and there, faint but clear, came a whisper. "Help me." Her eyes flew open. The group had moved on, leaving her behind. Alone in the morgue, she stood trembling, the whisper fading into silence. That night, Amelia returned to her room with a sense of inevitability. She no longer doubted that the crescent was showing her something. But why her? She wrote until her hand cramped, noting every detail: the vial, the whisper, the woman in white. At last, exhaustion forced her to lie down. Sleep dragged her swiftly under. She dreamed of the basement, the walls closed in the air, heavy with rot. She stood again before the laboratory door. This time, it opened for her. Inside, shadows writhed. Tables gleamed under dim bulbs covered with bottles and instruments. A man stood with his back to her, his white coat yellowed with age. Slowly he turned. His face was sharp, his smile thin. Norman Baker. But before he could speak, the woman in white appeared between them. Her figure shimmered, faint but determined. She lifted her hand, shielding Amelia from his gaze. Baker's smile twisted his mouth, forming words Amelia could not hear. The woman's lips parted. "Don't trust him," she whispered. "Don't drink." The dream dissolved in a rush of cold. Amelia woke gasping, clutching her throat. And on the nightstand once more lay the glass vial. This time the cork had already been removed. The smell reached her first. Sharp metallic with a sweetness that turned her stomach. The vial sat upright on the nightstand, its cork lying beside it like an afterthought. The liquid inside swirled slowly as though stirred by unseen hands. Amelia pulled the covers tighter around her, staring at it with wide, unblinking eyes. Her first instinct was to throw it out the window, to banish the thing as far as possible. But another part of her, the part that had come here seeking truth, compelled her to leave it untouched. The crescent was speaking to her, and she feared what might happen if she ignored its language. She turned her notebook toward herself, scribbling in the dim lamplight. The vial returned. Uncorked this time. Smell unbearable. Why me? Her pen stilled. Why her indeed? A knock interrupted her thoughts. Not at the door this time, but at the window. 3 deliberate raps, too high above the ground for anyone human to reach. Amelia's breath caught. She forced herself to look. The glass reflected only her own pale face and the dim glow of the lamp. The night beyond was black, impenetrable. Still the sound came again, 3 knocks insistent, like skeletal fingers against the pane. She rose slowly, legs trembling, and approached the window. As she neared the reflection, shifted. Another face appeared beside hers, a woman's face, translucent, sorrowful, framed by loose hair. Her lips moved soundlessly, but Amelia understood the shape of the words, "Help me." Her hand pressed against the glass. The face faded, leaving only the dark outline of the mountains. The silence that followed was heavier than the knocks had been. Unable to rest, Amelia dressed and slipped into the corridor. The 4th floor was hushed, its lamps dim. The carpet absorbed her footsteps as she moved past closed doors. At the far end, the hallway seemed to stretch longer than she remembered, its walls bending subtly inward. She reached the stairwell and descended the building, groaning faintly with each step. The 2nd floor smelled faintly of dust and polish, but as she moved lower, a different scent filled the air, antiseptic, bitter, laced with something coppery beneath. The basement pulled her like gravity. She should not have been able to enter at this hour yet. When she reached the service door, it swung open at her touch. The corridor beyond was dark, lit only by the glow of a single bulb flickering overhead. Her breath came shallow as she moved forward. The morgue lay ahead, its metal drawers glinting faintly in the half-light. She hesitated at the threshold, every instinct screaming to turn back. But something shifted inside the room, a shadow breaking away from the darker wall. It was the woman in white. Her figure wavered like candle smoke, but her eyes locked onto Amelia's. This close, the sorrow in them was unbearable, vast and endless. She raised her hand, pointing toward one of the drawers. Amelia shook her head. "I can't," she whispered, her voice breaking. The woman's lips parted, and this time sound emerged, a whisper like wind through stone. "You must." The drawer rattled metal, shrieking against metal. Slowly, inexorably, it slid open. The air grew colder, carrying with it the stench of rot. Inside lay a body wrapped in a stained sheet, the outline unmistakably human. Amelia staggered back, pressing against the doorframe, but her eyes were drawn downward. The sheet shifted, though no hand touched it. Fingers pale and skeletal emerged, grasping at the edge. Then slowly, the figure sat up. The sheet fell away, revealing a face gaunt and hollow-eyed. Not the woman in white, but another, an old patient trapped between worlds. Its mouth opened, a rasp escaping. "Tell them the truth." Amelia's scream caught in her throat. She stumbled backward, nearly falling against the wall. The woman in white reached toward her as if to steady her, but her touch passed through the air like mist. The corpse's eyes rolled toward Amelia, pupils clouded, gaze heavy with accusation. "Tell them," it rasped again, before collapsing back into the drawer. The metal slammed shut on its own, echoing like thunder in the narrow chamber. When Amelia looked back, the woman in white was gone. Only the cold remained thick and suffocating. Shaking violently, Amelia fled. She raced up the stairwell, her breath ragged, until she collapsed against the door to her floor. Her hands fumbled with the key, finally shoving herself inside. She locked the door, bolted. It pressed her back against it. Her lamp flickered, guttered, then steadied again. On the nightstand, the vial still waited, but now beside it lay something new. A photograph, old faded black and white. It showed Norman Baker standing in the basement morgue, smiling thinly, and beside him at his shoulder stood Amelia, her hair, her face undeniable. But the photograph was dated 1937. Amelia's hands trembled as she lifted the photograph. The edges crackled with age, brittle beneath her fingers, yet the image itself was unmistakable. She stared at her own likeness, her same hairline, her same sharp jaw, her eyes captured mid-blink. In the photograph, she stood behind Norman Baker, as though complicit, as though she had belonged in that decade and in that chamber. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She checked the back. In faded pencil, a note scrawled in a hand she didn't recognize. Subject 32. Volunteer. Her throat closed. Volunteer for what? The vial gleamed faintly beside the photograph, its contents swirling, restless. A thought, unwelcome but insistent, crept into her mind. Maybe she was never meant to write about this place. Maybe she had been meant to return. A soft hum filled the room, low and vibrating as if the walls themselves carried a current. The air pressed heavy against her chest, and she found herself moving back toward the mirror above the dresser. Her reflection stared back, pale and shaken. But behind her in the reflection only stood Norman Baker. He was tall, his white coat pristine, his face calm and smug. He rested a hand on her shoulder. She felt nothing on her skin, yet her body recoiled instinctively. His mouth moved in the glass. Drink. Amelia spun around, but the room was empty. Only her own rapid breathing filled the silence. She backed away from the mirror until her legs hit the bed. She collapsed onto it, curling inward, the photograph clutched against her chest like a shield. Sleep came in stuttering waves. She dreamed of the laboratory again, the bottles lined neatly, the chemical stink thick in the air. This time, she walked among the beds. Each was occupied figures writhing under thin sheets. Their faces were gaunt, their eyes pleading hands reaching weakly toward her. Tell them, they whispered in unison voices rasping through ruined throats. Tell them what he did. She stumbled backward, colliding with a tray of instruments that clattered to the floor. The sound echoed unnaturally, rising and twisting, until it became laughter. Baker stepped from the shadows, his smile wider, now eyes glinting. You see, he said, his voice smooth, practiced. They begged for hope, and I gave it to them. I gave them more than anyone else would. His hand extended, offering the vial. The liquid inside bubbled eagerly alive. You belong here, Amelia. You always did. One taste, and you'll understand. The dream fractured. She woke gasping, drenched in sweat. The lamp was out her room, cloaked in darkness. Only the faint glow of moonlight slipped through the curtains. She reached for the matches on the nightstand. Her fingers brushed cold glass instead. The vial had moved. It sat directly before her cork, gone liquid, breathing faintly in the moonlight. And beside it the photograph had changed. No longer was she standing in the background. Now, in the photograph, Amelia stood beside Baker, her hand resting on the gurney. The sheet that had covered the body was pulled back. She stared down at it, her expression unreadable. Amelia dropped the picture, heart hammering. She stumbled back until her spine hit the far wall. Her breath came shallow, ragged as the truth pressed in. The hotel was not just showing her its history, it was rewriting her into it. A sound rose outside her door, wheels turning slow and deliberate rolling down the hall. She closed her eyes, praying it would pass, but it stopped directly outside her room. The doorknob rattled once, twice. Then the door began to creak open. The bolt should have held it shut, but the metal slid free as though twisted by invisible hands. The door inched wider, revealing only darkness beyond. From that darkness, a single figure stepped forward, the woman in white. Her face glowed, faintly sorrow etched in every line. She raised her hand palm outward, as though shielding Amelia. Then her voice filled the room, soft but commanding. Do not drink. Do not trust him. Behind her, in the shadowed corridor, another figure loomed, taller, sharper, his smile unmistakable. Norman Baker. Amelia pressed back into the wall as the two forces, the woman in white and the man in the coat, faced one another in the doorway, their silent struggle filling the air with a tension that made every breath a battle. The air in Amelia's room thickened, humming like the moment before a storm. The woman in white stood at the threshold, translucent but unyielding, her eyes locked on Baker's figure behind her. He did not advance. He simply watched, his thin smile carved into something far colder than mockery. Amelia felt pinned between them, unable to move, every breath trembling in her chest. The vial on her nightstand vibrated faintly, as if stirred by their silent contest. Finally, Baker spoke. His voice was low-measured, a practiced cadence that carried a strange comfort, even as it chilled her blood. She came back to me. Don't deny her what she has always sought. The woman in white's voice rose, whisper soft yet unshakable. She is not yours. She belongs to no one. Baker's smile faltered, but his eyes sharpened. You think you can keep her from the truth, from what she already is. She is drawn here because she remembers. Amelia shook her head, clutching at the wall as though it could ground her. No, she whispered, her voice breaking. I don't remember. I've never been here before. Baker's gaze slid to her, patient and knowing. Look again, he said. Her eyes darted unwillingly to the photograph on the floor. The image had shifted once more. Now she stood not beside him, but in front of him, hands clasped around the vial, poised as if to drink. Her stomach twisted. The woman in white moved between them, her form flickering with strain. She turned her gaze on Amelia, sorrow weighing every word. He rewrites. He bends time until you fit into it. Do not let him take you. Baker's laugh was soft, dismissive. They begged for salvation. I gave them hope. She understands what hope costs. He tilted his head, his voice dropping lower. Don't you, Amelia? Her name rolled from his tongue like a claim. Her knees weakened, her grip on the wall slipping. For a moment she swore she did remember the echo of voices pleading, the heavy stench of chemicals, the endless hours in a dim laboratory. It felt like memory, though she knew it could not be. The woman in white stepped closer, her hand reaching toward Amelia's shoulder. This time the touch landed not solid, but cool, like the brush of water across skin. The contact steadied her. You're lying, Amelia whispered to Baker. Her voice cracked, but it held. Whatever this place is doing, it isn't my memory. Baker's smile collapsed into something harder. His figure darkened, shadows gathering around him until he seemed less man than silhouette. It doesn't matter, he hissed. Memory bends. History bends. The building remembers for you. He stepped forward, but the woman in white lifted both hands, and the door slammed shut between them. The bolt slid back into place, locking itself. The silence afterward rang in Amelia's ears like a struck bell. Her legs gave way, and she collapsed onto the bed. The woman in white remained faint and wavering, standing near the nightstand. She gestured toward the vial, her expression grave. Destroy it. Amelia hesitated. Every instinct screamed not to touch it, yet the idea of leaving it intact felt worse. She grasped the glass, the cold biting into her fingers. The liquid writhed within bubbles, breaking like gasps. She lifted it toward the window, meaning to hurl it into the night, but the woman shook her head. Not outside, not free. It must end here. Confused, Amelia lowered the vial. How she whispered. The woman's lips parted, but no sound came. Her form flickered, fading, as though her strength had been spent keeping Baker at bay. Her eyes met Amelia's one last time, pleading. Then she dissolved into the air, leaving only the faint scent of roses, faint, but achingly sad. Alone again, Amelia sat, clutching the vial, staring at the door. The silence pressed down, yet beneath it, faint and steady, came the sound of wheels rolling across stone. Somewhere below in the bowels of the hotel, the dead stirred restlessly. She knew then that the vial was only the beginning. The crescent would not let her leave until she faced what waited in its depths. Amelia lay awake until the pale wash of dawn seeped through the curtains. Only then did she allow herself to close her eyes, though even in sleep, the steady rattle of gurney wheels followed her into her dreams. The morning arrived gray and unsettled the air, heavy with the scent of rain. Amelia stood on the veranda, coffee cooling in her hands, staring out at the Ozark Hills. The world outside seemed alive with a hushed expectancy, the clouds hanging low, the trees swaying restlessly as if waiting. She thought of the vial still hidden beneath her folded clothes in the dresser. Its presence gnawed at her, a silent pulse she couldn't ignore. Downstairs, the lobby bustled with guests. Couples planned excursions. Children darted between the chairs, their laughter echoing against the polished wood. Yet to Amelia, the brightness felt brittle, as though one wrong word could crack the surface and let the shadows spill out. She caught sight of the same staff member who had spoken to her days before, the man with weary eyes. He paused near the front desk, and something in his gaze lingered on her. She stepped forward, lowering her voice. "You've seen them, haven't you?" His jaw tightened. He didn't deny it. "It's best not to look too long," he murmured. The crescent keeps what it wants. Don't give it more reason to notice you. Amelia's fingers tightened around the strap of her bag, but it already has. His eyes flicked toward hers, troubled, then away. Then you'd better tread carefully. People who dig too deep here. Sometimes the hotel decides they're part of its story. His words landed like stones in her stomach. That afternoon, she wandered the upper floors, her notebook clutched in one hand, camera hanging heavy from her shoulder. The hotel whispered in small ways. Doors creaked open behind her mirrors, fogged though the air was dry, and once she passed a hallway where every light flickered in unison as though signaling. In the third-floor parlor, she paused before a row of old portraits. The faces stared out with frozen gravity, former owners perhaps, or patrons long dead. One portrait in particular caught her eye, a woman with pale skin, her hair loose, her expression mournful. The resemblance to the woman in white was uncanny. Amelia stepped closer. The air cooled, pressing close against her skin. For the briefest moment, the woman's eyes in the portrait shifted, meeting hers directly. Amelia gasped, stepping back. When she looked again, the painting was still. Night settled quickly, rain pattering against the windows. Amelia returned to her room, nerves taut. She left the lamp burning, the vial still hidden in the dresser. Yet as midnight neared, the sense of being watched grew unbearable. A sound rose beneath her floorboard's wheels, rolling slowly, deliberately. The same gurney sound she had heard before, only louder, now closer. She pressed her ear to the carpet. The vibrations hummed upward, rattling through her bones. She grabbed her notebook, scrawling quickly. They're moving below me. Something is alive down there. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps at her door. Her breath froze. She waited, every muscle rigid. The knock repeated louder this time, followed by a soft scraping like fingernails dragging slowly down the wood. Amelia forced herself to move, inching toward the door. "Who is it?" she whispered. A pause. Then, in a voice low and familiar, Baker answered, "You." Her knees nearly buckled. She stumbled backward, heart hammering. The knob rattled, but the bolt held this time. Shadows slid beneath the doorframe, curling across the carpet like smoke. The smell of chemicals seeped through, acrid and thick. Then silence. When she dared to look again, the shadows had retreated. But something else had taken their place. On the floor, pushed under the crack of the door, lay another photograph. Amelia snatched it up, her hands shaking. This one showed the morgue gurney in the center sheet pulled back. A woman's body lay, exposed eyes, open and lifeless. And in the background, blurred but undeniable, was Amelia standing with her notebook in hand, as though she had been observing all along. She dropped the picture, bile rising in her throat. Her notebook, lay on the dresser. She opened it, desperate, flipping through pages. And there at the back were entries she had never written. Neat script, page after page, describing procedures, documenting patients, detailing failures. Her penmanship, her signature. But the dates read 1937. Amelia staggered back, the book slipping from her hands. She clutched her temples, the room spinning. She wanted to scream that it wasn't hers, couldn't be hers. Yet the more she looked, the more familiar the words felt, as though some buried part of her had indeed written them. The lamp flickered violently. Shadows stretched long against the walls, and then the whisper rose again, a chorus of broken voices filling the room. Tell them what he did." Amelia pressed her hands over her ears, shaking. "I will," she cried. "I'll tell them, just stop." The voices fell silent, and in the stillness that followed, the woman in white appeared once more, her figure faint and shimmering at the edge of the lamplight. She gazed at Amelia with sorrow deep enough to crush stone. "If you want the truth, you must follow me." She turned toward the door. and the bolt slid free on its own. Amelia knew then that there would be no rest until she descended again into the basement. Amelia's hand hovered over the door handle. The bolt had slid back on its own, as though the building itself had chosen for her. The woman in white lingered at the threshold, fragile and glowing faintly in the dim lamplight. She did not speak, but her sorrowful gaze drew Amelia forward, like a tether. The corridor outside was deserted. Rain beat faintly against the high windows, dripping down the panes in slow rivulets. The carpet muffled Amelia's footsteps as she followed the pale figure. Each lamp flickered as they passed, throwing jagged shadows across the wallpaper until it seemed the walls themselves shifted closer. The woman glided ahead, never turning her form, bending at the edges, as though she belonged more to memory than to flesh. Amelia clutched her notebook tightly against her chest, though she wasn't sure why it felt like a lifeline, or perhaps an anchor to the present. The descent began at the far stairwell. The steps creaked beneath her weight, each one groaning as though reluctant to bear her. The air grew colder, with every level the sense of dust and polish giving way to damp stone and mildew. By the time she reached the basement, the air pressed heavy against her lungs, thick with the faint tang of chemicals. The door to the basement corridor yawned open without a sound. She stepped inside the woman in white, leading her into the gloom. The corridor stretched, narrow, lined with rusted pipes that dripped steadily. Her breath clouded faintly in the cold, and her pulse quickened. The morgue door came into view, its iron handle glinting faintly beneath the single swaying bulb. The woman stopped lifting her hand toward it, then slowly turned to face Amelia. Her lips moved, forming words without sound. Amelia swallowed hard. "You want me to go in?" The woman inclined her head once, then began to fade her outline, dissolving into the air like mist in sunlight. Amelia reached out instinctively, desperate to hold her, but her hand closed on nothing. The scent of roses lingered briefly, then was gone. Alone, Amelia pressed her palm against the morgue door. The iron bit into her skin, icy and resistant, but after a moment it yielded, groaning open. The chamber beyond was darker than she remembered. The overhead bulb sputtered, throwing erratic flashes across the tiled walls. The gurney stood in the center, its surface scarred and stained. Drawers lined the far wall, their metal faces dull with rust. The air was sharp with the smell of antiseptic laced with something older, more human. She stepped inside. The door closed behind her with a heavy click. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then faintly she heard it, the slow roll of wheels echoing faintly, as though somewhere deeper in the earth another gurney was being pushed. The sound drew closer, louder, until it seemed to circle the room, though nothing stirred. Amelia's chest tightened. She gripped her notebook, forcing her feet to carry her toward the drawers. One rattled faintly, metal scraping against metal. Her hand lifted before she could stop herself. She tugged. The drawer slid open. Inside lay a body beneath a stained sheet, the outline disturbingly familiar. Her breath caught. With trembling hands, she pulled the sheet back an inch, then froze. It was her own face, pale and slack eyes closed as though in restless sleep. The sight ripped a sound from her throat, half sob, half scream. She stumbled backward, the drawer slamming shut of its own accord. The bulb overhead flickered violently. Shadows twisted along the walls, lengthening into shapes that did not match her movements. Figures emerged, patients in tattered gowns, eyes hollow, lips moving soundlessly. They pressed close, crowding the room without touch, their presence suffocating. One by one, their whispers filled the chamber. "Tell them, tell them, tell them." Amelia clutched her head, backing into the gurney. "I will," she cried, her voice cracking. "I'll tell the world what happened here, I swear it." The whispers swelled, then fell abruptly silent. The figures stilled, and from the shadows at the far end of the room, a darker presence stepped forward. Baker. His form was solid now, his coat white and spotless, his hair slicked neatly. He carried no instruments, no vials, only the smug certainty of a man who believed himself untouchable. His eyes glinted as they fixed on her. "You see, Amelia?" His voice was smooth, every syllable deliberate. "Even in death, they beg me for release. And yet you think you can stand against me." Her hands shook, but she forced her voice steady. "They don't want release from death. They want release from you." His smile thinned. "I gave them hope. You gave them poison." The bulb overhead shattered with a pop, plunging the room into near darkness. Only the faint glow from the open drawer illuminated his face. His expression hardened, twisted by anger, and then in the dark, his voice slid close to her ear, though he hadn't moved an inch. "You were mine once. You will be again." Amelia staggered back, her notebook slipping from her grasp and falling open on the gurney. The pages fluttered, landing on a passage she had not written. The ink was fresh words glistening. "She belongs to me. Always." Her scream died in her throat. The notebook lay open on the gurney, the fresh ink shimmering in the dim light. "She belongs to me. Always." The words glared up at Amelia, her own handwriting mocking her. She staggered back, her body pressed against the cold tiles of the wall. Baker loomed in the half-dark, his presence heavier than the air itself. Though the shadows obscured him, she felt the weight of his gaze as keenly as a hand pressed to her throat. "You see it, don't you?" His voice flowed smooth and steady, the kind of voice that could lull the desperate into obedience. "You wrote those words. You were part of this. Time doesn't forget. Neither do I." Her chest heaved, her nails digging into her palms. "I didn't write it. You're twisting everything." He stepped closer. The outlines of his white coat sharpened as though the darkness bent around him. Twisting, his smile stretched thin. "No, I reveal. The hotel remembers what the world wants to bury." The chorus of whispers swelled again, filling the room. "Tell them. Tell them." They pressed against her skull, rising until the words rattled her bones. She dropped to her knees, clutching her ears, rocking against the gurney. "I'll tell them," she screamed hoarsely. "I'll write it all." The voices fell silent. Baker crouched before her, his face inches from hers, the faint glow of the broken bulb outlining his features. His eyes gleamed with a kind of pity. "You'll write nothing, unless I will it." He reached toward her cheek. "You were meant to be my voice, the one who convinced the world." Before his hand touched her, the temperature plummeted. Frost bloomed across the metal drawers, crackling softly. The scent of roses filled the chamber. The woman in white materialized behind him, her glow fragile but resolute. She reached out her hand, passing through his shoulder. He stiffened, snarling low, his form flickering like a disrupted signal. Amelia scrambled to her feet, her notebook clutched tight once more. The woman turned to her eyes urgent. "Write the truth. That is how he breaks. Tell it, and he cannot hold you." Baker's face twisted with fury, his calm veneer cracking. "Lies." He spat, his voice vibrating through the walls. "Truth is what I decide. Without me, she has no words." The woman raised her hand, her figure flickering under the strain. "Tell them," she repeated, her whisper cutting through the storm. Amelia opened her notebook, flipping to the blank pages. Her pen trembled in her grip. The voices surged again, not in unison this time, but overlapping, dozens of them, men, women, children. Each voice ragged, broken, begging. She pressed the pen to paper, and the words spilled before she could think. He poisoned them. He stole their hope. He made the cure into a tomb. The gurney rattled violently. The drawers slammed open and shut, metal shrieking. The air filled with cries, some weeping, some screaming. Shadows surged upward like smoke, twisting into grasping shapes. Baker reeled, his form wavering. His voice thundered, "Stop!" The word shook the walls, dust falling from the ceiling. "You will not take them from me." But Amelia wrote faster, her hand moving of its own accord. He promised light. He delivered only shadows. The crescent remembers. "I will tell them." The woman in white stepped closer, her hand brushing Amelia's shoulder again. This time, it lingered cool and steady, guiding her pen. Baker's outline fractured his shape, breaking into shards of darkness. His voice rose into a roar, desperate now. "You are mine." Amelia's pen dug into the page, scrawling the final words. "I do not belong to you." The chamber convulsed. Light flared searing white. The gurney toppled, drawers slamming shut as though forced by unseen hands. The whispers turned into a single sigh, soft and released, like breath escaping into the open air. And then silence. When the light faded, Baker was gone. Only the cold lingered, and the faint scent of roses that slowly receded. The woman in white stood across from Amelia, her eyes calm now, her sorrow eased. She inclined her head, gratitude in the gesture. Amelia whispered, her voice raw, "Who are you?" The woman's lips curved faintly, though no words followed. She stepped back, her glow fading into the walls until nothing remained. Alone in the morgue, Amelia sank against the gurney, her notebook clutched against her chest. The silence pressed in deep and absolute. For the first time since she had arrived, the crescent felt less like a predator and more like a mausoleum, still heavy, still haunted, but quiet. And yet deep in her bones, Amelia knew Baker was not gone. Not entirely. The silence inside the morgue was so profound, it pressed against Amelia's ears as though the world itself had muted. She leaned heavily on the gurney, breath-shallow eyes fixed on the spot where Baker had dissolved. The air no longer smelled of chemicals. No more whispers clawed at her skull. And yet she couldn't shake the sense that his absence was temporary, like a shadow waiting to return when the light shifted. Her notebook remained warm against her palms, though the words she had scrawled no longer looked like her own. The handwriting was hers, yes, but bolder, firmer, as though guided by another hand. She traced her finger along the ink, half expecting it to smear, but the words were set deep into the page. The woman in white had disappeared, leaving only the faint memory of roses. Amelia whispered into the emptiness, "I'll tell them. I promise." The words echoed back to her, fragile and lonely. Gathering what strength she had left, she pushed herself upright and stumbled toward the door. The metal handle was icy, but it turned easily. The corridor outside yawned wide, dim bulbs casting sickly halos of light. Her footsteps echoed louder than they should have, bouncing unnaturally along the walls. At one point, she thought she heard a second set following hers, slower, heavier. She stopped. The echoes stopped too. Up the stairwell, her legs trembled with each step. By the time she reached the 4th floor, she felt hollowed out, her body running on instinct alone. The corridor stretched familiar, yet wrong, as though the angles leaned subtly inward, funneling her toward her room. The wallpaper patterns curled like vines, shifting in her peripheral vision. When she opened the door, her lamp was already lit. The vial sat on the nightstand once again, as if it had never left. Her heart lurched. She had left it in the morgue, or so she thought. The liquid inside pulsed, faintly alive. Beside it lay another photograph. She forced herself to look. This time it was not the morgue. It was her room, her bed, her dresser, her mirror. In the photograph, Amelia sat at the desk, pen in hand, notebook open. Her face was calm, almost serene, but her eyes were wrong, black, bottomless voids staring into the lens. Her stomach turned. She dropped the photo, but it fluttered neatly back onto the nightstand as though anchored there. Exhaustion overtook her. She sat on the bed, pulling her knees to her chest, rocking faintly as the weight of it all pressed down. She longed to run, to leave the crescent behind, but something deeper warned her leaving would not save her. Baker's reach was not confined to the hotel. At some point, she drifted into a shallow, feverish sleep. She dreamed of the veranda. The storm had passed the air, cool and damp. Guests milled about, smiling, laughing, their faces blurred like old film. Among them stood Norman Baker, his white coat pristine, his smile easy. He chatted with them like a host at a garden party. Amelia tried to scream to warn them, but no sound left her throat. She moved among them, shoving, tugging at their arms, but they did not see her. They only laughed, glasses clinking, until the sound curdled into coughing. One by one, they collapsed, their bodies convulsing, eyes wide with betrayal. Baker raised his glass to her as if in toast. History repeats, Amelia. Unless you let me finish what I began. The dream dissolved into darkness. She woke with a start, drenched in sweat, the lamp still burning. The vial sat untouched, but the photograph had changed yet again. Now she was standing beside Baker in the veranda, dream a glass raised in her hand, her eyes black voids. Amelia shoved it away, the picture skidding across the floor. Her chest heaved. She grabbed her notebook, pressing it against her chest like armor. The whispers rose again, but softer this time, almost mournful. Tell them. Tell them. She stood shaky but resolute. I will, she whispered fiercely. But not just in here. The world will know. The room fell silent, as though the building itself paused to listen. Amelia sank into the chair by the desk, opened her notebook, and began to write. Her pen moved urgently, recording every detail, the vial, the photographs, the morgue, the woman in white. She wrote as though racing time itself, filling page after page, until her hand cramped. When she finally paused, the lamp flickered once, then steadied. The photograph on the floor was gone. The vial was gone. Only the notebook remained. But in the silence that followed, Amelia knew this was only a reprieve. Norman Baker was not finished with her. Morning brought a deceptive stillness. Light streamed through the tall windows, soft and golden, illuminating the room with a warmth Amelia didn't feel. She sat at her desk, her notebook heavy with fresh words, its pages a frantic ledger of the night before. The air carried no chemical tang, no phantom music, no whispers. Yet her body knew better. This silence was the hotel's way of catching its breath. She dressed quickly, determined not to spend another moment trapped within her own thoughts. The Crescent was alive, but there were others inside it, staff guests, living people who moved through these halls as though none of this touched them. Perhaps if she spoke to them, if she showed someone the words in her notebook, she could root herself in reality again. Downstairs, the lobby hummed with the bustle of the day. A family checked in their children, laughing as they dragged small suitcases across the polished floor. A couple waited for the elevator, whispering quietly, hands clasped. To them, the hotel was grand, historic, charming. To Amelia, every corner held a shadow just out of reach. She found the staff member with weary eyes, the one who had warned her before. He was arranging papers behind the desk, his jaw set tight. She approached quickly, lowering her voice. I need to talk to you. Privately, he glanced up, his expression guarded. After a moment, he nodded toward a side door that led into a narrow office. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and coffee. He closed the door behind them, folded his arms, and waited. Amelia set her notebook on the desk between them, opening it to the fresh pages. "Read," she whispered. He hesitated, then leaned forward. His eyes scanned the entries, the vial, the photographs, the morgue, Baker's voice. With each line, his face tightened. When he finally looked up, his voice was low. "You shouldn't have written this." Her heart lurched. "But you see it, don't you? This isn't just me. The hotel, he's here. He's trying to pull me in." The man's eyes flicked toward the door, as though making sure they were still alone. "The Crescent doesn't like attention. You put words to it, you give it power. That's why most people stay quiet. Pretend the shadows aren't there." Amelia leaned forward, desperate. But that's exactly what he wants. Silence. That's how he kept them. She broke off, realizing her voice had risen. The man's expression hardened. "Lower your voice. If you fight it too loudly, it notices. And once it notices..." He shook his head, his throat working as if swallowing something he couldn't speak. Her hands trembled as she clutched the notebook. "Then what am I supposed to do? Pretend this isn't happening. Pretend I didn't see him." His voice softened, almost pitying. "If he's chosen you, there's no pretending. You can't run from him. The only way is to face him." He hesitated, then added, "But not alone." Amelia's breath caught. "You've seen him too." He didn't answer directly. Instead, his gaze slid past her shoulder to the small office window. For a heartbeat, his face drained of color. Amelia turned, following his stare. There, in the glass reflection, stood Norman Baker. His smile was faint, satisfied, as though watching a performance unfold exactly as scripted. He raised a single finger to his lips in a gesture of silence. Amelia spun around, but the office was empty. The staff member cursed under his breath, running a hand over his face. "You need to leave. Tonight. Before it's too late." She shook her head violently. "Leaving won't matter. He'll follow." He said I was already his." The man's jaw clenched. "Then you need to decide if you'll let him be right." Her throat tightened. She clutched the notebook, the only thing anchoring her, though even its words felt tainted now. "I won't let him," she whispered, more to herself than to him. The man exhaled slowly, his voice heavy. "Then be ready. He'll test you again." She left the office shaken, her mind spiraling. The guests in the lobby still laughed, still smiled, unaware of the battle being waged within these walls. Amelia hugged the notebook against her chest and climbed back toward her room, every step feeling like a descent rather than an ascent. When she unlocked the door, her stomach turned cold. The vial was back on the nightstand, corked once more, liquid swirling gently as though stirred by an unseen hand. Beside it lay another photograph. This time, she wasn't standing beside Baker. She was lying on the gurney, eyes closed, lips parted. And Baker stood over her, smiling. The photograph trembled in Amelia's hands. Her own body stared back at her from the glossy surface, pale, lifeless, laid out on the gurney. Norman Baker loomed above her, his grin carved into something cruel, as though proud of a masterpiece only he could see. She dropped the picture as if it burned. It fluttered to the floor, landing face up, waiting. Her chest tightened, panic threatening to spiral. She backed into the desk, gripping its edge until her knuckles whitened. The vial swirled on the nightstand, bubbles rising and breaking as though the liquid were alive, listening. The whispers returned, faint at first, then building. Not the desperate chorus she had heard before, but quieter, measured, almost coaxing. "Drink, drink, drink." The words slithered into her ears, into her bones. She pressed her palms against her head, shaking. "No," she whispered fiercely. "I won't." The lamp flickered shadows crawling along the walls. In the mirror above the dresser, Baker appeared again. He leaned lazily against the reflection's frame, his arms crossed, his smile patient. "You're fighting yourself, Amelia," he said softly. His voice was velvet, each syllable smooth, persuasive. "The photographs only show what's inevitable. You belong here as you always did. One taste, and you'll remember." Amelia forced her eyes away, staring at the carpet. "You're lying. You're trying to make me part of this place," he chuckled low. "Part of it, my dear, you already are." The mirror darkened his form, thickening into shadow, until only his eyes glowed faintly. They locked on hers, unblinking. The room's temperature plummeted, her breath misting in the air. Then, another sound broke through the soft rustle of fabric, the scent of roses. Amelia turned sharply. The woman in white stood near the window, her glow faint but steady. Her sorrowful eyes fixed on Amelia, and she shook her head slowly. "Do not drink." The whisper came firm and unwavering. "Do not give him what he wants." Amelia clutched the notebook against her chest, torn between them. Her mind throbbed with conflict, the voices overlapping Baker's persuasion, the woman's plea. The vial pulsed faintly, and her hand twitched toward it against her will. The woman in white drifted closer, placing her cool hand over Amelia's. The compulsion broke, and Amelia gasped. Tears burned her eyes, a surge of anger rising through the fear. She shoved the vial from the nightstand. It shattered on the floor, liquid spreading like a dark stain across the carpet. The whispers exploded into shrieks. The room convulsed, the mirror rattling violently in its frame. Baker's face twisted fury, consuming his calm facade. "You dare!" His voice thundered, shaking the walls. The woman in white raised her arms, her glow flaring brighter. For a moment, the shrieks dulled, pressed back. Baker's form writhed in the mirror, fractured by cracks splintering across the glass. "Leave her!" The woman whispered, her voice trembling with strain. "You cannot have her." Baker roared, his hand slamming against the inside of the mirror cracks, spiderwebbing outward. Shards began to fall, tinkling against the dresser, each one reflecting a distorted piece of Amelia's face. She screamed and turned away, clutching her notebook like a shield. When she looked back, the mirror was whole again. Baker gone. The carpet was dry, unmarked. The vial was gone too, as though it had never existed. The woman in white lingered, her glow dimmer now, her form flickering. She gazed at Amelia with eyes heavy with exhaustion. "You are stronger than he thinks, but he will not stop. You must finish what he began, or he will bind you here." Amelia's throat tightened. "Finish what?" she whispered. The woman only shook her head. Then, like smoke drawn away by wind, she vanished, leaving Amelia in silence once more. Alone, Amelia looked down at her notebook. The fresh pages no longer carried her frantic scrawl. Instead, new words bled slowly across the paper in neat, even script. Section 1, Patient Notes. Her breath caught. The notebook wasn't hers anymore. It was his. Amelia stared at the words bleeding across the page. Section 1, Patient Notes. The ink was fresh, still glistening, though she hadn't moved her pen. She flipped the page, her fingers shaking. More writing spread across the paper in the same neat clinical script. Subject 14. Male, mid-40s. Presented with late-stage carcinoma. Refused to accept the truth. Administered tonic. Results inconclusive. Her stomach turned. She turned another page. Subject 15. Female, young, desperate, believed fully. Results hopeful for a time until silence took her. The words multiplied, each entry colder than the last. Dates filled the margins. 1937, 1938. Yet the ink glistened as though written moments ago. Amelia's breath came ragged. She tried to close the notebook, but her hands wouldn't obey. Her fingers turned the pages one by one, compelled. Every line cataloged the suffering of men and women who had come seeking hope. Each entry ended with the same detached phrase, "results failure." And then she found her own name, Subject 32, Amelia Hart, volunteer, promising candidate. She will carry the record forward, her blood iced. The ink was still spreading, the letters forming as she watched. She snapped the book shut and hurled it across the room. It struck the dresser with a dull thud and fell open on the carpet. From within its pages a sound seeped out. Not words, but muffled sobbing. It rose softly, curling into the room until Amelia could hear multiple voices layered together. Patients, dozens of them crying in despair. She pressed her hands to her ears, but the sound burrowed past bone deeper into her mind. She scrambled to her feet and fled the room, heart hammering. The fourth-floor corridor stretched long and narrow, the lamps buzzing faintly. She half expected to see Baker waiting at the end, but only shadows shifted there, clinging to the wallpaper. The stairwell pulled at her. She descended quickly, her footsteps echoing too loud in the emptiness. The second-floor parlor was deserted chairs, waiting like silent witnesses. She pressed forward, desperate to find anyone alive to break the suffocating hold of the dead. She nearly collided with a guest rounding the corner. A young woman laughing to herself, her phone in hand. Amelia exhaled sharply, relief rushing through her. "Please," she whispered, grabbing the woman's arm. "Do you hear it? The crying." The guest blinked at her, startled. "Crying? No, it's just you and me." Her smile faltered as she took in Amelia's pale face and shaking hands. "Are you okay?" Before Amelia could answer, the sobbing grew louder, loud enough that the walls seemed to vibrate. The guest frowned, looking around. "Wait, what is that?" Amelia's throat tightened. The sound wasn't just in her head anymore. It spilled into the world. The woman's phone slipped from her hands, clattering to the carpet. Her face drained of color as she backed away. I think I need to go." Without another word, she fled down the corridor, her footsteps pounding. The sobbing swelled, no longer muffled, but raw, anguished. Amelia staggered forward, drawn helplessly. The air chilled, her breath visible. Ahead, a door creaked open slowly, though no hand touched it. It was the ballroom. Moonlight spilled across the polished floor. The grand piano stood at the far end, its lid raised. Notes plinked softly, discordant, as though invisible fingers tested the keys. The sobbing poured from the walls themselves, blending with the music until it became unbearable. Amelia stepped inside the door, shutting quietly behind her. Shadows shifted near the piano, gathering, coalescing. The woman in white appeared, her face heavy with sorrow. She lifted her hand, gesturing toward the instrument. Amelia's body moved, despite herself, crossing the floor. The piano keys gleamed, waiting. She reached out her fingers, trembling, and pressed one. The note rang out, sharp and solitary. The sobbing ceased instantly. Silence crashed into the room. Then a voice, low, smooth, unmistakable, rose from behind her. At last, Baker murmured, "You're ready to play your part." Her heart lurched. She turned, and there he stood in the moonlight, more solid than ever, his smile wide. The notebook lay open on the piano bench, pages fluttering, though there was no wind. The notebook fluttered, as if invisible hands turned its pages, each one catching the pale wash of moonlight before settling again. The sobbing had vanished, leaving the ballroom hollow, heavy, too still. Amelia's hand hovered above the keys, her fingertip trembling against the ivory. Norman Baker stood a few feet away, his white coat immaculate, his smile composed as though he were conducting a recital he had waited decades to hear. His voice carried easily in the vast space. "You hear them, don't you?" he said softly. "All those poor souls who came to me with hope burning in their eyes. They trusted me. They needed someone to tell their story, to record their pain. And now," his gaze fell to the notebook, "that someone is you." Amelia shook her head. though her throat felt too tight for words. She stepped back from the piano, but her body resisted as though the air thickened, forcing her to stay within reach of the keys. The notebook snapped shut, then opened again on its own. The words on the pages shimmered with fresh ink. Lines of music written in staff and notes filled every inch. Baker's voice deepened, commanding, "Play." Amelia's breath quickened. "I can't," she whispered hoarsely. He tilted his head, his smile curving sharper. "Oh, but you can. You've played this piece before, Amelia. Long ago. Don't you remember?" Her stomach lurched. Images flickered in her mind, hands on piano keys, candlelight, the weight of eyes watching. The memories didn't belong to her, yet they seeped in, as though she had lived them. She staggered back, clutching her temples. "No, those aren't mine." Baker stepped closer, his presence pressing into her. "The crescent keeps what the world forgets. You were here. You played for them, for me, for the dying." Her knees trembled, nearly buckling. The woman in white appeared at the edge of the room, her form faint, flickering like a candle near its end. She shook her head slowly, her gaze fixed on Amelia. "Don't play," her whisper carried fragile but steady. "If you do, he binds you here forever." Baker's smile faltered, his eyes narrowing. "She lies. She always has. She wants to keep you trapped in grief. I offer you purpose." His hand extended, palm open. "Play and you will remember everything. Play, and you'll never be alone again." The notebook pulsed faintly, glowing with each note inked on its pages. The keys of the piano trembled, vibrating as if begging to be struck. Amelia's fingers twitched, the compulsion so strong it made her chest ache. She looked from Baker to the woman in white. One face, calm, persuasive, offering certainty. The other, sorrowful, weary, but protective. Her breath shook. "If I don't play," Baker's eyes gleamed, his voice velvet and final, "then you fade into nothing, into silence." The woman's whisper came again, breaking, urgent. "Silence is freedom. Choose silence." Amelia's pulse roared in her ears. She forced her hand away from the keys, gripping the edge of the piano instead. "No," she gasped. "I won't play for you." The ballroom convulsed. The chandelier above rattled violently, crystals clinking like teeth. The floorboards groaned as though something massive shifted beneath. Baker's face twisted, fury shredding his composure. "You think you can deny me?" His voice thundered, reverberating off the high walls. "You think silence will save you?" He surged forward, his shadow stretching impossibly long across the floor, swallowing her feet, creeping higher. Amelia staggered back, but the notebook slammed shut and leapt into her arms as though forced there. Her fingers burned where they touched the cover. The woman in white flared brighter, her form flickering desperately. She thrust her hand toward Amelia, whispering with every ounce of her fading strength, Tear it now." Amelia clutched the notebook, her breath ragged, Baker's shadow pressing higher against her chest. The book pulsed like a beating heart. Her scream tore from her throat as she ripped the spine-open pages, flying like wings across the ballroom. The shadows shrieked. The chandelier crashed, shattering into 1,000 glittering shards. The piano's keys smashed down in a violent chord, then silence swallowed everything. Baker's form splintered into smoke, his voice still echoing faintly. "You cannot erase me, Amelia. The crescent remembers." And then he was gone. Amelia fell to her knees, the torn remains of the notebook scattered around her, the woman in white flickering faintly near the window. Her sorrowful eyes softened with relief, though her form wavered, translucent as mist. She inclined her head once in gratitude before dissolving into nothingness. The ballroom lay in ruins of silence, Amelia's hands bled where the paper had cut deep crimson, staining the pages still drifting across the floor. But for the first time since she'd arrived, the whispers were gone. The silence in the ballroom was suffocating. Dust hung in the air like a fine veil drifting slowly in the pale moonlight that filtered through the tall windows. The shattered chandelier lay scattered across the polished floor glass, glinting like fragments of ice. Torn pages fluttered, some catching on the broken crystals, others sliding across the boards with faint whispers of paper on wood. Amelia knelt among them, her hands throbbing with pain. Thin rivulets of blood traced down her wrists where the paper had sliced her skin. She pressed her palms against her dress, trying to steady her breath. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was hollow, as though the building itself had drawn in a long breath and was holding it, waiting. Her gaze fell to one of the torn pages at her knees. Ink bled across the paper lines of music, dissolving into black smears. But beneath the ruined notes, words had appeared in sharp, neat handwriting. She bent closer. "You can destroy the book, but you cannot destroy the story. The crescent holds it. Always." Her throat tightened. Even torn, even bled out, Baker's voice lingered. She forced herself to her feet, glass crunching under her shoes. The piano stood silent now, its lid trembling slightly, as though it had exhaled after centuries of tension. She wanted to run out of the ballroom, out of the hotel, into the storm, still muttering beyond the hills. But instinct told her the crescent wouldn't let her leave. Not yet. The door behind her creaked open on its own. The corridor stretched empty, lamplight flickering. She stepped out cautiously, the air colder than before, pressing against her skin like wet cloth. The silence followed her, heavy and oppressive. Back on the 4th floor, the hallway seemed longer, unfamiliar. The wallpaper patterns twisted subtly, curling into shapes that almost resembled words she couldn't read. The lamps buzzed overhead, dimming as she passed. Her room door waited at the far end, but even from a distance she knew something had changed. When she reached it, the door was ajar. Her breath caught. She had locked it when she left. Slowly she pushed it open, the hinges sighing. Inside her lamp was lit warm yellow light spilling across the familiar furniture. But the bed was occupied. A figure lay upon it, perfectly still beneath the covers. The shape was unmistakable, her own. Her body. Amelia staggered back, her throat closing. She pressed against the doorframe, unable to look away. The figure's face turned toward her eyes, snapping open. They were black voids, bottomless and gleaming. The mouth stretched into a smile. Her smile, but sharper wrong. The other Amelia sat up, moving with jerks as though pulled by strings. Her voice was hers, but warped, layered with echoes. "You tore the book," it said. "But you can't tear yourself away. You are the record now." Amelia shook her head violently. No, I'm not." The doppelganger swung its legs over the bed, standing. The shadows clung to it, deepening its form, pulling it taller. "You already write his words. You already dream his dreams. You belong to the crescent, Amelia. The sooner you accept it, the sooner the screaming stops." Her hands trembled, nails biting into her palms. "I won't. I'll fight you. I'll fight him." The figure tilted its head, smiling wider. "Fight you are only fighting yourself." The shadows surged and the doppelganger lunged. Amelia screamed, slamming the door shut, pressing her back against it. The wood shuddered violently as the thing inside pounded against it, harder and harder, the sound like fists and bones cracking against the panels. Then silence. The door stilled beneath her weight. She opened it a crack. The room was empty, but on the bed lay another photograph. It showed Amelia asleep in that very bed, the shadows curling at her throat like hands. The photograph quivered in her trembling hands. Amelia's likeness stared back at her, eyes closed, body limp, while black shadows coiled across her throat as though squeezing the last breath away. She dropped it onto the bed, bile rising in her throat. The paper landed soundlessly face up, waiting for her to look again. Her chest ached with each breath, the walls of the room pressing closer. She wanted to flee, to burst from the crescent and never return. But she knew running would be useless. The hotel had already marked her. The shadows would follow wherever she went. The mirror above the dresser caught her attention, its surface rippling faintly like disturbed water. She crept closer, drawn despite herself. Her reflection stared back, pale, exhausted, but undeniably her. Then slowly, a second image bled through. Her doppelganger standing just behind her shoulder, smiling faintly. Its lips moved, but no sound reached her ears. She pressed her hands to the glass, trembling. "What do you want from me?" The reflection leaned close, its black eyes wide. Its voice slid into her head, cold and intimate. "To finish what you began." Amelia staggered back, shaking her head. "I didn't begin anything." "He did." "Baker did." The figure's smile widened, cruel. "And yet you write it now. You dream it now. You are the continuation." The lamp flickered violently, shadows crawling up the walls. The reflection dissolved into black smoke, and Norman Baker emerged in its place, his smile calm once more. He adjusted his white coat, as though this were merely a consultation. "You see," his voice was soft, almost paternal. "The crescent does not trap, it transforms. It takes the broken and makes them eternal. You can resist, Amelia, but resistance is pain. Acceptance is peace." She clenched her fists, nails cutting her palms. "Peace, you poisoned them. You killed them." His smile sharpened. "I preserved them. Their stories live here because of me. And now, through you, they will live forever." The mirror darkened until it was pure black glass, his face fading. Only her reflection remained, but her eyes were no longer hers. They were black, void, and endless. Amelia screamed and swung her fist, shattering the mirror. Shards rained down, slicing her skin. The fragments scattered across the floor, each one catching a distorted glimpse of her face. The room shuddered violently, the walls groaning. From beneath the floorboards came the unmistakable sound, gurney wheels rolling, dozens of them rattling toward her. The drawers of the dresser slammed open and shut. The bed shook as though something thrashed beneath it. The whispers rose again, louder now, overlapping until they were almost words. "Join us. Join us. Join us." Amelia stumbled to the door, but the knob burned her palm. She ripped her hand away, skin blistering where it had touched. The hotel wasn't going to let her leave. Her gaze snapped back to the bed. Another photograph had appeared, resting neatly on the pillow. With shaking fingers, she picked it up. It showed the basement morgue again, the gurney in the center. But this time she was not lying on it. She was standing beside it, hands raised over the body, her face serene as though in ritual. The body beneath the sheet was featureless, blurred, waiting. A sick understanding filled her chest. Baker wasn't trying to kill her. He was trying to make her replace him. The shadows pulsed around her, pressing closer, whispering in hundreds of voices. "Finish it. Be the record. Be the cure." Her knees buckled, and she sank to the floor, clutching the photograph to her chest. Tears streaked her face, mingling with blood from the cuts on her hands. "I'm not yours," she whispered hoarsely. "I won't be." The lamp exploded, plunging the room into darkness, and from that darkness, footsteps approached, slow, deliberate, echoing as if from a great distance. The footsteps grew heavier with each beat, deliberate and unhurried, as though whoever approached knew Amelia could not escape. Her breath caught shallow and ragged in the darkness. She pressed herself against the cold wall, her palms stinging from broken glass. The black pressed thick around her, almost tangible. She strained her ears. The sound was closer now, heel then toe measured against the floorboards. But no door had opened. No one could have entered. Her hands fumbled across the wall until they brushed the nightstand. She found the matches, struck one desperately. The tiny flame flared, casting jagged light across the room. For an instant she saw it, the woman in white standing by the window, her form faint but steady, her eyes fixed on Amelia. Relief surged until Amelia realized she wasn't alone. Behind her in the corner near the dresser stood Baker. His face was clearer now, skin, waxy eyes gleaming as though lit from within. His white coat was immaculate, not a stain to betray his crimes. He smiled faintly, almost tenderly. "Do you see how close you are now?" he said softly. "You've already begun the work. They've chosen you. All you need to do is finish." The match burned low, singeing her fingers. She gasped, dropping it. Darkness surged back, swallowing everything. Only his voice remained rich and calm. "Don't be afraid, Amelia. Fear is a cage. My cure is freedom. All you need do is accept." The whispers swelled again, louder than ever, hundreds of voices overlapping in a desperate tide. "Finish it. Finish it. Finish it." She clutched the photograph still in her hand, the one showing her poised above the gurney. She wanted to scream that it was a lie, that she wasn't his successor. But deep inside, a seed of doubt twisted. Why did the notebook write itself in her hand? Why did she see memories that weren't hers? The woman in white's whisper cut through the storm, fragile but steady. "He is trying to bind you. If you take his place, you will never leave. Do not write for him. Do not speak for him. Remember the truth." The shadows shifted violently, the floor trembling. The mattress of the bed sagged as though something unseen had settled upon it. Amelia crawled backward, her shoulders striking the dresser. Her hand found a shard of broken mirror. She gripped at the edge, biting her palm, but she didn't let go. "Truth," Baker scoffed, his voice darkening. "Truth is malleable. Ask the hundreds who begged me to cure them. Did they want honesty, or did they want hope no matter the cost?" His smile sharpened, gleaming in the dark. "I gave them what they wanted. That is truth." "No," Amelia rasped, forcing her voice through clenched teeth. "You gave them death." The whispers hissed violently, twisting her name. "Amelia, Amelia, Amelia." Something cold brushed her shoulder. She swung the shard wildly, the glass cutting nothing but air. Baker laughed softly. "You cannot fight shadows," he murmured. "They only grow when you resist." The woman in white appeared again, closer this time, her glow straining against the dark. She reached toward Amelia, her hand hovering just above hers. The shard in Amelia's grip trembled. "Light," the whisper urged. "Only light breaks him." The matchbox lay somewhere on the floor. Amelia dropped to her knees, scrabbling desperately across the boards. Her fingers found it struck another flame. The small light flared, weak but defiant. Baker recoiled slightly, his smile faltering, the shadows around him thinning. His voice dropped, venomous now. "You think a spark will save you. This hotel was built on darkness. It is mine. And soon you will be too." The flame guttered, threatening to die. Amelia cupped it in her hands, shielding it, tears streaking her face. "No," she whispered. "I'm not yours." The woman in white's glow flared, blending with the tiny flame until the room pulsed with fragile light. The shadows writhed Baker's form, shuddering, his features warping into smoke. "Remember the woman," whispered her voice like wind through the trees. "He has power only if you believe him." The flame licked Amelia's fingers, forcing her to drop it. The light vanished. Darkness surged back, swallowing everything, and Baker's voice slid close to her ear, intimate and final. "Then I'll make you believe." The darkness swallowed her whole. Amelia's lungs constricted, every breath shallow, as though the air had thickened into tar. She staggered forward blindly, palms stretched before her, searching for any trace of the room she had known. The walls, the bed, the dresser gone. The crescent had shifted, pulling her into its marrow. Then came the sound, a steady drip, 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 echoing in the dark. The smell followed antiseptic, stinging her nose copper sharp on her tongue. The shadows thinned into dim light, revealing tiled walls yellowed and cracked. The morgue again. No, the hospital as it had been. Amelia turned in a slow circle. Beds stretched in both directions, metal frames lined in rows. Patients lay upon them, thin forms under stained sheets, faces gaunt, eyes hollow. Some stared at her with open mouths, lips cracked, whispering soundless words. Others reached weakly with trembling hands grasping at the air. Her stomach knotted. "This isn't real," she whispered. "This is your trick." Baker's voice rose from behind her, calm, soothing, as if explaining a lesson to a student. "No trick. Only memory. You wanted truth. Amelia, this is truth." She spun. He stood in the center of the ward, coat pristine, hands clasped behind his back. His face was serene, his eyes bright with conviction. "They came to me broken. I offered them hope. Look at them," they believed. A patient coughed violently red, staining the sheet. Another cried weakly, a sound so raw it pierced Amelia's bones. She covered her ears, shaking her head. "This isn't hope. This is suffering." Baker's expression didn't falter. "Suffering is inevitable. Hope is rare." I gave them something to cling to even as death closed its fist. They begged me to continue, and so I did. The room trembled, the lights flickering. One by one, the patient's eyes turned toward Amelia, their whispers growing audible. "Tell them. Tell them. Tell them." Her knees weakened. She pressed her back against the nearest wall, glassy tile cold against her spine. "I will," she promised hoarsely. "I'll tell them everything." Baker stepped closer, his shadow stretching long across the floor. "And who will believe you? A trembling woman with fever dreams know Amelia. They'll call you mad, unless..." His gaze sharpened. "Unless you embrace it, carry the record as it was meant to be carried. My work, our work immortal." The shadows thickened, curling around her feet like smoke. The patients writhed, their voices merging into a desperate chorus. "Don't, don't, don't." The woman in white appeared at the far end of the ward, her glow faint but resolute. She moved between the beds, her presence calming the cries, though her sorrow deepened with each step. Her eyes fixed on Amelia, pleading. "He cannot force you unless you accept. Resist his story. Write your own." Amelia's head pounded. Baker's voice pressed heavy on one side, the woman's whisper light on the other. The notebook materialized in her hands, pages blank and waiting. The pen hovered her fingers, trembling. Baker's voice softened, almost tender. "All you have to do is write what you see. Nothing more. Look around you, the truth is already here. Put it down. Make it eternal." The woman's whisper wove through the cries. "If you write his words, you bind yourself. Write only yours, your truth." The pressure mounted until her vision blurred. The patients moaned, reaching for her, their hands skeletal and cold. Baker leaned close, his breath chill on her skin. "Write, Amelia. Finish it." Her hand moved toward the page pen, poised. The weight of choice crushed her chest, and then she forced her wrist away. Her voice, breaking into the ward. "I will write, but not for you." She scrawled furiously across the blank pages. "You lied. You poisoned them. I will not continue your story. I will tell mine." The room convulsed. The beds shook, patients gasping. Baker's face twisted, his calm composure fracturing into rage. "No." His voice thundered. "You cannot unmake me. You are me." The woman in white flared, her glow burning brighter than ever. The cries shifted into sighs, soft and relieved. The smoke around Amelia's feet thinned. Baker staggered, his form blurring at the edges. His voice tore through the ward, raw and furious. "If you deny me, then I'll take you another way." The lights shattered, plunging everything into darkness, and Amelia felt hands cold skeletal clamping onto her arms, dragging her down through the floor. The hands gripped her with crushing force, skeletal fingers digging deep into her arms, dragging her through the tiles as if they were water. Amelia thrashed her screams, muffled by the thick black current swallowing her whole. The ward above her dissolved into fragments of light, Baker's furious roar echoing even as the darkness devoured it. "You are mine, Amelia mine." Then silence. She fell, not down, not in any direction. She could understand, just deeper. Deeper into the marrow of the crescent itself. Her body landed hard on cold stone. She gasped, scrambling to her knees. The air here was heavier, stale, pressed with centuries of silence. It was a tunnel, long arched and endless. The walls were stone damp with moisture etched with markings she couldn't decipher. Lines that swirled into symbols, repeating, twisting, almost alive. The ground beneath her palms vibrated faintly as though something massive stirred below. She stood shakily, hugging her arms close. A faint light glowed at the far end of the tunnel. She stepped toward it, each footfall echoing too loudly. The deeper she walked, the more the air shifted, carrying whispers that rose from the stones themselves. Not the frantic chorus of before, but low, rhythmic murmurs. "Finish it. Finish it." Her chest tightened. "No," she whispered fiercely, her voice cracking against the cavernous dark. "I'll never finish it." But the tunnel answered with silence, then a slow, rattling breath that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The light ahead grew stronger, spilling from a vast chamber. Amelia stepped inside and froze. Rows of gurneys stretched in every direction, endless in number, their wheels rusted, their frames scarred. Upon each lay a figure draped in white sheets. The chamber stretched into eternity ceiling, lost in shadow. Above chains dangled some swaying gently, as though moved by unseen hands. At the center stood Norman Baker. His form was sharper here, more real than ever, as if the crescent's heart gave him strength. He turned as she entered, his smile calm, once more fury concealed beneath that polished facade. "Welcome," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the chamber. "This is where truth lives, where every soul I touched waits remembered. You see now, Amelia, the hotel is not haunted. It is preserved, eternal, and you, his eyes glinted. You will ensure it remains so." The sheets on the gurneys stirred. One by one, the figures beneath them sat up. Their faces were pale, sunken eyes, hollow. Yet each turned toward Amelia, whispering in unison, "Tell them, tell them." Her knees buckled. The air pressed so heavy, she thought her chest would collapse. "I am telling them," she cried. "I've written it all. I've seen you for what you are." Baker's smile sharpened. "No, Amelia. You've written fragments, shadows, but you must write it all, every detail, every name. Only then will they know the truth. Only then will you belong here as I do." The whispers grew louder, weaving into one voice. "Right, right, right." Amelia clutched her bleeding hands against her chest, shaking her head. "If I write what you want, I'll become you." He stepped closer, his white coat immaculate even as shadows curled at his feet. "You already are becoming me. Look at them." He gestured to the endless gurneys. "They call to you. They chose you. All you must do is finish." The woman in white appeared, suddenly flickering near the nearest gurney. Her glow was faint, her form strained, but her eyes burned with urgency. "Don't listen. He binds them by story. Free them by silence. Tear the record from your hands. Baker's voice cracked like a whip. Lies' silence erases them. She would have you forget. Forget his death. Write them, Amelia. Let them live. The figures on the gurneys leaned forward, their whispers sharp-cutting. Tell us. Tell us. Tell us. The notebook materialized in her grip, heavy and pulsing like a heart. Pages fluttered open, blank and waiting. Her pen hovered, trembling. She stood between them. Baker on one side, the woman in white on the other, pulled taut by two truths. To write was to remember. To remember was to preserve. But whose preservation? Was it hers, theirs, or Baker's? Her vision blurred with tears. She screamed, her voice echoing into the cavern. I won't be you. And she hurled the notebook into the endless rows of gurneys. The chamber convulsed. The chains above rattled violently, crashing against stone. Shadows screamed, the sound tearing through her skull. The gurneys rocked, figures collapsing back beneath their sheets. Baker staggered, fury twisting his perfect face. Fool! He roared, his voice shaking the chamber. You cannot destroy memory. You are memory. The woman in white flared, suddenly bright, her form burning with light. She reached toward Amelia, her whisper clear. Then let memory go. The floor split beneath Amelia's feet. She fell again, swallowed by light, this time not shadow. The fall ended abruptly, her body striking something soft, not stone, but earth. Amelia gasped, clawing at the ground. Damp soil pressed beneath her palms, rich with the smell of moss and roots. She staggered upright, blinking against the sudden brightness. She stood in a forest. Tall oaks rose above her, their branches knit tight, shrouding the sky. A soft wind rustled the leaves, carrying the scent of rain, and something older like memory itself had been woven into the air. The crescent was gone, its walls, its corridors, its shadows. Yet even here, its weight lingered in her chest. Her hands stung the cuts, raw blood mingling with dirt. The notebook was gone, her pockets empty. For the first time since stepping into the hotel, she was truly unarmed. A voice drifted through the trees, low and steady, carried on the wind. You cannot escape me, Amelia. Her stomach clenched. She turned slowly. Norman Baker stepped from the trees as though he belonged here, his white coat unmarked by mud or rain. He smiled faintly. The serenity returned, the fury buried deep beneath his polished calm. This is the route, he said, spreading his arms. The crescent's heart. Do you feel it? Every soul buried in its walls feeds this place. You can tear books, you can shatter glass, but memory grows back-rooted eternal. And you, he tilted his head. You are part of that root now. Amelia shook her head, voice cracking. I'm not. I never was. His smile widened, pitying. Then why do you dream their dreams? Why do you write words you do not remember? Because you were chosen. You are the one who carries the story forward. Her knees trembled. No, I carry my own story. For the first time, his smile faltered. Shadows rippled at his feet, spreading across the soil like veins. If you deny me, Amelia, you deny them. All of them. His voice sharpened, commanding. Do you want them forgotten? Do you want them erased? The trees shivered, their trunks creaking like bones. The air filled with whispers, thousands of voices threading together. Tell us. Remember us. Don't let us fade. Her chest constricted. She pressed her hands over her ears, shaking. I want to remember, but not for you. The woman in white appeared among the trees, her form, faint light straining against the forest's gloom. She walked slowly, her gaze fixed on Amelia, her voice a whisper carried on the leaves. Memory does not live in books, Amelia. It lives in those who breathe, those who choose to carry truth. You do not need him to remember them. You only need yourself. Amelia's breath caught. The weight of the notebook was gone, but the words remained within her. She had seen the faces, heard the cries, felt the cold hands. She could carry them without Baker, his voice cracked with rage, his mask slipping. Lies. Without me, they vanish. Without me, she vanishes. He pointed to the woman in white, his face contorted. She exists only because I preserved her. The woman shook her head slowly, sorrow in her eyes. I exist because I was. Because I am remembered. Not by you, but by those who choose to speak my name without fear. Baker's scream shook the forest. Shadows surged, twisting up the trees, choking the branches. The whispers turned frantic, overlapping, begging, demanding. Amelia's body buckled beneath the sound. She dropped to her knees, hands clawing at the soil. I can't hold them all, she cried. It's too much. The woman in white knelt before her, her glow flickering but resolute. She placed a cool hand over Amelia's heart. You don't have to hold them. You only have to let them go. The earth trembled, cracking beneath Baker's feet. His form blurred smoke, tearing at the edges. No, he roared, his voice raw. If she lets go, so do I. Amelia's tears streaked her face. She pressed her hands against the soil, her voice breaking. Then go. All of you. Go free. The forest convulsed. The whispers rose into a single shattering cry, then dissolved into silence. The shadows collapsed, bleeding into the soil. The trees stilled their branches, swaying gently in the quiet wind. Norman Baker's figure twisted, fracturing his voice, desperate now. Without me, they are nothing. He reached for Amelia, his hand passing through her like smoke. His face warped, contorted into fury and fear. You cannot erase me. Amelia met his gaze, her voice trembling but steady. I don't have to erase you. I just have to stop believing you. The words struck like a blade. His form shattered fragments, scattering into the wind. His scream dissolved into silence. The forest brightened. The woman in white stood tall, her sorrow eased her glow, steady and calm. She gazed at Amelia with gratitude. You are free now, and so are we. Her figure dissolved into light, scattering like petals in the breeze. Amelia collapsed against the soil, her body racked with sobs. But the silence that followed was gentle, not suffocating. For the first time since entering the crescent, she felt the weight lift. The forest faded. The cool earth beneath Amelia's hands dissolved into wooden floorboards, the scent of moss replaced by the faint perfume of old polish and dust. Her eyes fluttered open. She lay in her room again on the 4th floor of the Crescent Hotel. The lamp glowed gently on the nightstand, steady, no longer flickering. For a moment, she lay still, unsure if her chest rose and fell in waking life or some final dream. The silence around her was complete, no whispers, no phantom piano, no rolling wheels. Only her own breath filled the space. Slowly, she sat up. The mirror above the dresser remained broken shards scattered across the floor where she had left them. But no face stared back from the fragments. No black eyes, no smug smile. Only fractured pieces of her own weary reflection. Her gaze darted to the nightstand. Empty. No vial, no photograph, no notebook. Her heart pounded. She stood searching the room. Nothing stirred. Her suitcase remained where she had left it, the curtains still drawn against the dim light of dawn. The world looked painfully ordinary, as though the last nights had been swallowed whole by the hotel itself, and yet her hands told a different story. The cuts from glass still stung thin red lines crisscrossing her palms. Proof. She touched her wrist, feeling the pulse there strong and stubborn. Proof she was alive. Proof she had resisted. She stepped into the corridor. The carpet stretched, long quiet. A couple passed her, chatting softly about breakfast, oblivious to the shadows that had prowled these halls hours ago. Their laughter felt fragile, but real. Amelia descended to the lobby. Morning light streamed through the tall windows, bathing the grand staircase in gold. Guests checked out, children skipped across the floor. Staff moved with easy grace. The hotel alive, breathing, but hushed. The man with weary eyes stood at the desk. He glanced up as Amelia approached. For a fleeting moment, his gaze lingered on her, sharper than before, as if he knew. As if he had seen the battle etched into her pale face. "You should go," he said quietly, almost kindly. Amelia nodded. "I am." She signed her name in the ledger, her hand trembling only slightly. As she did, a chill ran down her spine. The handwriting in the row above hers caught her eye. Elegant, neat, the letters sharp. Norman Baker. The date beside it was yesterday. Her throat constricted. She looked up sharply, scanning the lobby. No white coat, no pale figure. Only guests and staff moving in the soft morning light. Still, her chest ached with the sense of his presence, faint but lingering. She pressed her suitcase handle until her knuckles whitened. Outside, the morning air struck her face cool and clean. The road wound down the hill, the Ozarks spreading vast and green beyond. She stood for a moment on the veranda, looking back at the pale walls of the Crescent Hotel. Its windows gleamed faintly, watching. For the first time, she thought she heard nothing from inside. No piano, no whispers, just silence. And yet, as she turned away, she felt the weight of words still inside her. The faces she had seen, the voices she had heard. She would write them her way, not his. Not to preserve him, but to free them. Amelia walked down the long road from the hotel, the building shrinking behind her with each step. The air grew warmer, the sound of birds filling the trees, grounding her. But she knew the Crescent would remain, waiting, watching, preserved in silence until another wandered through its doors, seeking beauty history, or perhaps the faint thrill of ghosts. And when they did, it would breathe again. The Ozark Hills stretched endlessly as Amelia drove, the Crescent shrinking in her rearview mirror until it was nothing more than a pale tooth against the horizon. Each curve of the winding road loosened the grip on her chest, but the silence in the car was too clean, too empty. She turned on the radio static. She switched stations, more static. Finally, she shut it off, the quiet pressing closer. Her hands tightened on the wheel. The cuts stung with each flex of her fingers. They hadn't healed, hadn't faded like a dream. Proof. She whispered to herself, "It's over. It's over." The words felt fragile, like glass that might shatter with the wrong vibration. Hours later, she reached her small apartment, a modest space lined with bookshelves and the faint scent of old paper. She set her suitcase down, locked the door behind her twice, and leaned against it until her shoulders sagged. Home. Safe. But the silence followed. That night, she sat at her desk, staring at a blank page in her journal. The pen trembled in her hand. She forced herself to write. The Crescent Hotel is haunted, but not by ghosts, by memory, by lies made eternal. The words flowed, halting at first, then faster. She wrote about the woman in white, about the vial that appeared on her nightstand, about the photographs that rewrote themselves. She wrote about the morgue, about the endless gurneys, about Baker. Especially Baker. Her pen scratched late into the night, filling page after page. She told it all her way, not to preserve him, but to strip him bare. When exhaustion overtook her, she pushed the journal aside and stumbled to bed. Sleep came quickly, heavy and dreamless. But in the morning, when she returned to her desk, her stomach dropped. The pages she had written were gone. The journal lay open, its sheets blank. The pen rested neatly across the center as if placed there by careful hands. Her pulse hammered. She snatched the book, flipping furiously. Nothing. Every page pristine. A sound broke the silence. The faint scratch of a pen coming not from her hand, but from the journal itself. Slowly, words began to bleed through the blank paper. Elegant and neat. Subject 32. Amelia Hart. She will carry the record forward. She shoved the journal away, her breath catching tears stinging her eyes. No, she whispered. I destroyed it. I let it go. The words darkened, pressing deeper into the page the crescent remembers. And so do you. Her reflection in the window caught her eye. She froze. Her face looked back hollow-eyed pale, but the eyes were wrong. Not black voids, not entirely. Just darker. Watching her, the silence in the room shifted, no longer empty, but full, as if the hotel's walls had followed her home. For a long moment, Amelia stood motionless, staring at her own reflection. Then she closed the journal slowly, carefully, her voice a whisper, trembling in the still air. I'll tell it, but I'll tell it my way. The silence didn't argue, but she knew it listened. Days bled into one another. Amelia kept the journal closed, stacked beneath piles of ordinary notebooks, yet she felt its presence humming faintly through the wood of her desk. At night, she dreamed not of the hotel itself, but of fragments moonlight across the ballroom floor, the sound of wheels rattling down unseen halls, the faint perfume of roses. When she woke, the silence of her apartment seemed thicker, as though the crescent had followed her in shadow rather than in stone. She began writing elsewhere on loose sheets of paper on her laptop, anywhere that wasn't the journal. She poured out her account, the vial, the photographs, the woman in white Baker's relentless voice. Each sentence felt like a strike against his grip. She wrote with urgency, terrified that if she paused too long, the words would vanish again. After a week, she submitted the first draft to her editor, a trusted colleague who had always believed in her instincts for unusual travel stories. She didn't expect a quick reply, but within hours, the phone rang. Amelia, her editor's voice was strained, bewildered. This isn't your usual work. Are you certain? Amelia pressed the phone to her ear, pacing the apartment. It happened. Every word of it. I can't explain how, but it's true. You asked me for stories that would grip readers. This is the one. A long pause crackled down the line. It's powerful, disturbing, but there's a problem. Her stomach tightened. What? Some of the pages, Amelia, they're not in your voice. They're clinical detached. Patient records as if lifted from somewhere else. I don't know how they got mixed in with your draft. Amelia froze, the blood draining from her face. What do they say? Numbers, names, failures, like someone cataloging experiments. His voice dropped. Amelia, it looks like the handwriting's yours. Her knees nearly buckled. She clutched the back of a chair, whispering, No, I didn't write those. Then how did they get there? She had no answer. That night, she returned to her draft on the laptop. She scrolled through page after page, her words vivid and raw. But scattered throughout were paragraphs she had never typed, clinical notes echoing Baker's hand. She tried to delete them. The cursor blinked stubbornly, refusing. The words pulsed back onto the screen line after line. She slammed the laptop shut, trembling. From the corner of her eye, her reflection in the window shifted. For a moment, she saw herself seated at the morgue's desk pen, scratching steadily, face calm, eyes black. She spun around. Only her apartment. Only the rain sliding down the glass. The silence pressed closer. She whispered into the still air, I'll write it my way. You can't stop me. The journal on her desk shuddered faintly, the cover shifting, as if something beneath it stirred. She reached for the stack of papers she had written by hand, desperate to hold on to her version. But when she spread them out, her heart dropped. Every sheet had changed. Her words were gone, replaced by Baker's script, neat and merciless. Subject 33. The writer. Resistant. But every resistance is part of the cure. Amelia dropped the pages, clutching her head. Her breath came ragged, her chest constricted. She stumbled backward until her shoulders struck the wall. The journal slid off the desk and landed open at her feet. New words bled across the blank page ink, dark and fresh. The crescent does not end at its walls. The crescent is wherever you carry it. Her reflection in the shards of broken mirror on the floor smiled back at her. Not her smile, his. Amelia did not sleep. The night stretched long, each hour measured by the ticking of her wall clock, steady and merciless. She sat at her desk, the journal open before her, though she hadn't touched it. Words kept bleeding across its pages without her hand, each line sharper than the last, each entry folding her deeper into Baker's script. She refused to look at it. Instead, she turned on her laptop, fingers trembling across the keys. She opened a new document, not trusting the old one. Fresh words spilled out. This is my account, my truth. Baker's voice is not mine. He cannot own me. She wrote furiously, pouring everything into it, desperate to drown his presence in her words. When she paused to breathe, the silence pressed tighter. Her reflection in the dark screen shifted faintly. Her posture slouched. Her eyes shadowed. Her mouth pulled into Baker's calm, cruel smile. She slammed the lid shut, pulse racing. By dawn, she had made her decision. If she could not hold the story alone, she would give it to the world. She packaged her draft raw, jagged, imperfect, and sent it to her editor with a single message. Publish it. Don't wait. Don't change a word. Then she left the apartment. The streets outside were wet from night rain, the city waking slow. People hurried past, coffee in hand, oblivious to the weight pressing against her. She pulled her coat tighter, forcing herself to keep moving. By evening, the story was live. The response came quickly. Some readers called it the most chilling account they had ever read, praising its detail, its atmosphere. Others dismissed it as invention, a gothic flourish spun from a restless imagination. But scattered among the comments were voices that made her blood run cold. I stayed at the Crescent once. I saw the woman in white too, the gurney wheels. I heard them outside my door. I thought I was dreaming. He spoke to me, Norman Baker. I thought I imagined it. Dozens, then hundreds, all sharing fragments of their own. Her words had cracked something open, and now more voices joined hers, shaping a chorus that stretched far beyond her pen. For a fleeting moment, relief washed through her. She wasn't alone. Others had seen, had heard, had felt the Crescent's weight. She wasn't mad, but the relief curdled when she scrolled further. Amid the responses, new words began to appear, clinical, detached, echoing the same tone that had haunted her pages. Subject 34, Subject 35. Failures. Results inconclusive. Her hands trembled as she scrolled. The entries multiplied, not written by her, not by readers, but inserted as though the story itself was rewriting. Each refresh brought more. Her reflection in the laptop screen smiled faintly. Not hers. His. Her editor called late that night, his voice low, shaken. Amelia, the draft you sent, it's changing. Live. The article edits itself. My team swears no one is touching it, but the words keep multiplying. She pressed the phone tight to her ear, her voice breaking. It's him. He's using it. He's spreading. Silence filled the line. Then carefully. Should I pull it down? Amelia stared at the glowing screen, the endless scroll of new entries. Each line was another voice bound tighter to the Crescent, another thread woven into Baker's tapestry. Her throat closed. She whispered, "If you pull it, it's like it never happened." And then he wins. Her editor hesitated, then sighed heavily. Then it stays. She ended the call, her body trembling. In the quiet of her apartment, the journal lay open again, fresh ink unfurling across the page. "Well done, Amelia. The record is spreading, just as it should." She slammed it shut, tears burning her eyes. But deep down, she knew he was right. The crescent had left its walls, and now it lived in her words. The days that followed blurred. Amelia barely left her apartment. The curtains stayed drawn, the outside world muted by her isolation. Her phone buzzed, constantly calls from her editor, emails, messages from strangers. Some praised her courage, others begged for answers. But more disturbing were those who seemed altered. "I read your story. He spoke to me in my sleep. The woman in white was at my window last night. Thank you for letting me see her. He said I'm next. Should I be afraid or honored?" Amelia scrolled through them until her hands shook too violently to continue. Every word she had written had been a plea for release, a fight to free the dead from Baker's grip. But now, through her story, he had seeped further. The crescent had always been hungry, but she had fed it. The journal remained on her desk, silent for hours, then suddenly filling with fresh ink. "They believe because of you. They see because of you. You carry me farther than the walls ever could." She shoved it into a drawer, but the scratching of a pen continued through the wood, steady and relentless. By the third night, sleep was impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw corridors stretching into infinity, her footsteps echoing in familiar halls. She smelled chemicals. She heard the roll of gurney wheels, and always Baker's voice followed, calm, patient, inevitable. "You gave me what I wanted, Amelia. You told the world. They know my name again." She jolted awake at dawn, drenched in sweat, heart hammering. She stumbled to the bathroom, splashing cold water on her face. When she looked up, her reflection stared back, but the eyes were not her own. They were his, calm, smiling. Her scream tore the silence apart. She smashed the mirror with her fist glass, raining into the sink. Her hand bled crimson, spreading in rivulets, but the reflection remained in the shards. Baker's face, dozens of times over, staring up from every piece. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. She snatched it up, nearly dropping it from the blood slicking her palm. The message was short, anonymous. "I stayed at the Crescent after your story. The piano played for me. He asked about you." Her stomach turned. She scrolled further, dozens of similar messages, people flocking to the hotel, now drawn by her words, seeking the thrill of the haunted, the touch of something beyond. The Crescent was no longer fading, it was thriving. She staggered back to her desk, clutching her injured hand, eyes wild. "No," she whispered. "That's not what I wanted. That's not what I wrote." The journal slid from the drawer, opening on its own. New words scrawled across the page. "What you want no longer matters. You've remembered me. You've carried me. You've given me eternity." Her tears blurred the ink. She grabbed the book, hurling it against the wall. It struck and fell open on the floor, still writing. The woman in white appeared faintly in the corner, her glow weak, her form flickering. Her voice was strained, barely a whisper. "You must stop him, Amelia, before his name grows too loud. Silence him, or he will spread beyond the Crescent forever." Amelia dropped to her knees, clutching her bleeding hand. Her voice trembled. "How I've tried. I've torn the book, I've thrown it away, I've let him go. He keeps coming back." The woman's eyes glistened with sorrow. "Because you are still holding him. In your words, in your fear." The journal's pen scratched louder, filling the room. "She belongs to me, always." Amelia's scream shook the walls. She snatched the book from the floor, blood smearing across its pages. "Then I'll end it my way." She set it on the desk, struck a match, and held the flame trembling over the paper. The ink pulsed once alive. The air grew thick with the scent of chemicals. Baker's voice rose all around her, furious now. "You burn me, Amelia, you burn them all. The woman in white whispered desperately, "Burn it. Set them free." The match dropped. The pages caught instantly, fire racing across the book, ink bubbling, smoke curling black and thick. The journal writhed as though something inside resisted its destruction. Amelia pressed her bleeding hand against it, forcing it down as the flames roared. Baker's scream filled the apartment, a sound of rage and despair mingled into one. The fire devoured the words, the cover curling in on itself, until nothing remained but ash. Silence crashed down. Amelia collapsed. Her hand scorched her breath, ragged. For the first time since leaving the crescent, the silence felt empty, not waiting, just silence. The woman in white lingered one last time, her glow soft, her sorrow eased. She bent her head a whisper, like wind through leaves. "Thank you." Then she was gone. Amelia stared at the ashes on her desk, trembling. She had silenced the journal, but deep inside, she wondered, had she silenced him, or had she only fed the fire he needed to spread beyond her? The ashes smoldered on her desk, gray flecks curling upward in thin threads of smoke. Amelia sat slumped in her chair, her scorched hand cradled against her chest, the smell of char lingering thick in the air. The silence that followed felt absolute. No whispers, no scratching pens, no gurney wheels rattling through her thoughts. For the first time in weeks she slept. When she woke, morning sunlight flooded her apartment. The air was fresh, carrying the faint scent of rain from an open window. For a fleeting moment, she felt weightless, unburdened. The journal was gone. Baker was gone. She told herself that over and over as she cleaned the desk, sweeping the ashes into a tin and sealing it tight. She bandaged her burned hand, wincing at the sting, but every movement felt purposeful, an act of reclaiming her space. She even dared to laugh once, a small broken sound that surprised her. "It's over," she whispered, daring to believe it. It has to be. But by evening the messages began again, not from strangers this time, from the article itself. Her phone buzzed, alerting her to a new comment. She opened it reluctantly, eyes scanning the screen. A user had posted, Subject 36, Amelia Hart. Status incomplete. Her blood chilled. She refreshed. Another appeared, then another. Subject 37, volunteer. Status promising. Subject 38, results inconclusive. The entries multiplied, spreading through the article, crawling into the margins, filling every comment section. Not written by readers, written by something else. Her laptop chimed from the desk. The screen lit up on its own. Her article scrolled without her touch, new paragraphs appearing in real time. The record continues. Fire cannot erase it. The crescent remembers. Amelia's breath hitched. She slammed the lid shut, her body shaking. "No," she whispered. "I ended it. I burned it." A faint laugh rose in the silence, smooth and patient, curling around her like smoke. "You gave me more than you know," Baker's voice murmured. Words spread further than fire. "You made me eternal, Amelia." Her reflection in the darkened window shifted. She stepped closer, dread prickling her skin. Her face stared back, pale, exhausted, but her mouth curved into a smile she did not make. The reflection whispered in sync with his voice. "You cannot silence me. You carried me beyond the crescent. You are my archive." Amelia staggered back, clutching her bandaged hand. Tears blurred her eyes. "Then I'll stop writing. I'll stop telling it." The reflection's smile widened, cruel. "You cannot. You've already written too much." Her phone buzzed again. She looked down. A new email from her editor. Subject line, incredible response. Her stomach dropped as she read the preview text. "It's everywhere, Amelia. People can't stop sharing your story. They're calling it unforgettable." She dropped the phone, the sound sharp in the silence. The ashes on her desk stirred, faintly shifting, though the tin was sealed tight. The faint smell of chemicals seeped into the air again. Amelia pressed her back to the wall, whispering to herself, He's not gone. He'll never be gone, the silence answered with the low, steady roll of invisible wheels moving slowly across her floor. The sound of the wheels grew louder, circling her apartment as though an unseen gurney was being pushed just beyond reach. Amelia pressed her back tighter to the wall, her breath ragged. The floorboards trembled faintly with each turn of the wheels. "Stop!" she whispered, voice raw. "Leave me alone!" The rolling ceased. Silence folded heavy over the room. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps at her door. The same rhythm that had haunted her nights in the Crescent. She froze, staring at the wood as her chest heaved. Another 3 knocks, slow, deliberate. Her body moved before her mind could stop it. She reached for the handle hand, trembling. She knew she shouldn't open it, knew nothing good could be waiting. And yet the pull was irresistible, like the hotel's breath against her neck. She turned the knob. The hallway outside was empty. Only the dim light of the building's sconces flickered across peeling wallpaper. Her neighbors' doors remained shut, silence pressing thick against the walls. But on the floor lay another photograph. Amelia bent down with shaking hands. The image showed her apartment, not the Crescent, not the morgue, not the ballroom. Her apartment. The photo was taken from behind her, showing her seated at the desk, head bowed, pen in hand, writing furiously. She dropped it instantly, bile rising in her throat. She hadn't written anything since she burned the journal. And yet the photograph said otherwise. The faint scent of roses drifted through the hall. Amelia turned sharply. The woman in white stood at the far end, her glow dimmer than before, her form wavering like smoke. Her eyes fixed on Amelia, sorrowful but urgent. "He is spreading," her whisper carried. "Through your words, through their eyes. You must stop feeding him." Amelia's voice cracked. "I tried. I burned it. You burned the book, not the story," the woman interrupted gently. "The story still belongs to him, because you gave it to the world in his voice." Amelia staggered back, her knees weak. "Then what do I do? Tell me what to do." The woman's glow flickered, her form trembling, as though straining to stay visible. Silence. Only silence starves him. No more words, Amelia. No more remembering. Forgetting is the cure. The hallway light sputtered violently. The woman glanced upward, fear flaring in her gaze. "He knows I'm here." Her form collapsed into sparks of light, fading into nothing. Amelia gasped, clutching the wall. "Wait, don't leave me." From behind her came the voice, smooth and steady, curling around her like smoke. "You see, Amelia, even she admits it, you must choose silence. And silence is nothing. I offer you eternity. I offer you purpose. Write, and you will never be forgotten." She spun back toward her apartment. Baker stood just inside her doorway, perfectly solid, as though he belonged in this world now. His white coat gleamed, his eyes calm, his smile patient. "You are already my archivist," he said softly. "The world listens because of you. The record grows because of you. Do not deny what you've become." Her hands shook violently. She backed away until her spine struck the opposite wall of the hallway. "I won't be you." Baker tilted his head, his smile deepening. "You already are." From inside her apartment, her laptop chimed. The screen glowed through the doorway. Amelia's article had changed again. She glimpsed the new headline, bold and merciless. "The Crescent Never Ends" by Amelia Hart. Beneath it, fresh paragraphs unfurled her voice, but not hers, spreading Baker's story to anyone who would read. Her reflection flickered faintly on the laptop screen, smiling with black eyes. And outside, beyond her window, gurney wheels rolled down the street, echoing into the city. Amelia slammed the apartment door shut, her back pressed hard against it, as though wood alone could bar Baker from crossing over. Her breath came in ragged bursts. But when she turned, the room was already shifting. The light from her laptop pulsed unnaturally brightening and dimming like a heartbeat. New words spilled across the screen without her touch. Subject 39, the city, status receptive. Her stomach dropped. She yanked the power cord, slammed the lid closed. But the glow did not stop. The screen bled light even through the casing, faint shapes moving across the glass like shadows behind frosted windows. The faint sound of a typewriter ticked steadily, though no keys moved. Then the first siren. Amelia staggered to the window, parting the curtains with shaking hands. The street below, usually quiet at this hour, was alive with chaos. People poured onto the sidewalks, some shouting, some weeping, some simply staring blankly as if caught in a trance. A car swerved, horn blaring narrowly, avoiding a man who stood unmoving in the crosswalk. The siren wailed closer. Then another joined the city's heartbeat quickening, and beneath it all, she heard them. The wheels. Dozens of them rolling through the streets, though no gurneys could be seen. The sound threaded through the city, echoing off glass towers, weaving down alleys, steady, relentless. Her phone buzzed with messages again. She picked it up with trembling fingers. I heard the wheels outside my building. I thought it was in my head, but my neighbors hear them too. He stood at my door last night, Amelia. He asked if I had read your story. The woman in white came to me. She said it's too late, that he's already here. The screen scrolled on its own, dozens, hundreds of messages, all saying the same. We see him now. Amelia dropped the phone, her breath catching in her throat. No, she whispered. Not outside. Not here. A soft laugh rose behind her. She turned slowly. Baker stood in the middle of her apartment, calm as ever. His white coat, unblemished, his hands clasped neatly. He looked around her space with mild curiosity, as though inspecting a patient's room. Do you see? He said, voice smooth, patient. The crescent is not confined. Memory is not confined. You gave me voice, and the world listened. She shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face. I gave them truth. I gave them warning. His smile sharpened. You gave me eternity. The walls trembled faintly. For a moment, they weren't her apartment walls at all, but the tiled corridors of the crescent stretching outward in every direction. The smell of chemicals filled the air, sharp and suffocating. Shadows flickered across the plaster, forming rows of beds, the outlines of patients shifting, moaning. She screamed and stumbled back, clutching her bandaged hand to her chest. I'll stop. I'll stop writing. I'll burn it all. You cannot undo what is shared. Baker interrupted his tone, almost gentle. The record lives in them now. Every reader, every whisper, every retelling. I am in their minds, as I am in yours. Outside, another siren screamed, cut short by the sound of screeching brakes. Then silence. Then faintly, dozens of voices rising in unison, echoing up to her window. Tell them, tell them, tell them. She clapped her hands over her ears, sobbing. I told them everything. Baker stepped closer, his shadow stretching across her floor like smoke. No, Amelia. You only told them half. To free them, you must tell it all. Every experiment, every failure, every name. Her legs buckled. She sank to the floor, back pressed against the wall, shaking her head. No. If I finish it, I become you. His smile widened, patient, unyielding. You already are. The lights flickered violently. For a heartbeat, the apartment vanished. She sat once more in the Crescent's morgue, the gurney before her, the notebook waiting. The sound of wheels thundered all around, and then silence. When she opened her eyes again, she was alone in her apartment. The glow of the laptop had died. The city outside hummed with uneasy quiet, but on the floor, where the journal's ashes had been swept, new words glowed faintly against the wood. Section 30, wind down. Her blood froze. Baker's voice whispered, soft, steady, inevitable. Shall we finish? Amelia's breath stilled in her chest. The words shimmered faintly on the floorboards, etched in a hand that was not hers. Section 30 wind down. Her pulse thundered. She knelt, reaching out with trembling fingers, but the letters were carved into the wood, warm beneath her skin, as though alive. Baker's voice rose close and calm, though no figure stood in the room. "We've come to the end, Amelia. Every story must end. You've carried it well." She shook her head violently. "No, I won't finish it. I won't give you the last word." The floor shifted beneath her boards, bending like ribs inhaling. The room darkened the air thick with the familiar stench of chemicals. Her apartment walls dissolved, reforming into the crescent's corridors, endless, winding alive. She stumbled backward, clutching at her chest, and then she was there again. The morgue. The gurney stood in the center, its surface cold and waiting. A single notebook rested atop it, bound in cracked leather, its cover blank, its pages breathing. Around her drawers rattled whispers rising into a chorus. "Tell them. Tell them. Tell them." Baker stepped from the shadows, his coat immaculate, his smile unyielding. His eyes gleamed with triumph. "You see, Amelia, you can burn pages, smash mirrors, even flee my walls. But memory does not die. It waits. And now it waits for you." He gestured toward the notebook. One last entry. One final word. End the record, and it is yours forever. Her legs shook, her heart hammering. She looked to the far corner. The woman in white stood there, faint but radiant. Her sorrow lifted her eyes calm. She lifted her hand, her whisper clear. "Do not write. Do not speak. Leave the page empty, and he starves." Amelia's throat closed. The pen on the gurney pulsed faintly, waiting for her hand. The whispers pressed tighter, insistent, desperate. "Finish it. Finish it." Her tears fell hot across her cheeks. She stepped closer, trembling. The notebook pulsed once beneath her palm. Baker's smile, sharpened eyes gleaming. "Yes. One word, Amelia, that's all." She raised the pen. For a long moment, the world held its breath. Then she dropped it. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking but steady. "I don't finish you. I let you fade." The chamber convulsed. The whispers fractured into cries, then into silence. The gurney cracked the notebook, bursting into ash. The walls groaned, collapsing into white light. Baker screamed, his voice shattering, pulled into the void like smoke and wind. The woman in white smiled faintly. "Thank you," she whispered before dissolving into the light herself. Amelia collapsed to the floor, her body racked with sobs. The silence that followed was not hollow, but gentle, as though the crescent itself had finally exhaled. When she opened her eyes, she was back in her apartment. The ashes on the desk were cool. The laptop was dark. The air was still. For the first time in weeks, the silence held. "Hey guys, if you've made it this far, thank you for staying with me through tonight's story. I know it was a long one, and the shadows we walked together were heavy. The Crescent Hotel in Arkansas is a place layered with beauty and history, but also with echoes that have never quite faded. People call it America's most haunted hotel, and after what we've explored together, maybe you can see why. But now, as the final echoes fade, I want to leave you in a gentler place. Imagine yourself far from the winding halls and silent corridors, lying comfortably in your own bed. Outside, the night air is cool and soft. A breeze brushes the curtains. The world beyond your window is quiet, steady, safe. Take a deep breath. Let it fill your chest, then release it slowly. Feel the weight of the story slip from your shoulders like an old coat. What lingers is only calm. The crescent remains where it is in its stone and history far away. Its stories stay in the past, as all stories eventually do. Here in your space, you hold nothing but quiet. Let the hum of your fan, the soft rhythm of your breathing be the only sound that matters. Close your eyes and allow the silence to cradle you. The night is yours safe and steady. Sleep well knowing that the story is told and you are free from it now.